Hi everyone, my name is Estella. This story is about my mother-in-law, who seemed determined to make my life difficult. From the start, my mother-in-law, Lisa, never liked me. She's a bit old-fashioned but often takes it too far. My husband, Rhett, and I lived far away from them for years, so Lisa couldn't do much to bother me. But when Rhett got a better job near them, we moved closer, and I found myself dealing with her again. I wouldn't have minded handling Lisa because I grew up with toxic and controlling parents, so I knew how to deal with people like that. Plus, my father-in-law, Vince, was always supportive of me. The real problem started when Lisa had access to my 8-year-old daughter, Julie. Julie is a sweet child who loves being around her family. Since we were already not talking to my parents, Vince and Lisa were the only grandparents she had. I tried to put my issues with Lisa aside so Julie could have a good relationship with them. Rhett also thought his family was important, so cutting Lisa off wasn't an option. Vince and Lisa were loving towards Julie, but Lisa had one big issue. She would always say, "I don't like how you feed Julie, Estella. She's not eating everything she should. She needs more nuts for protein. You're taking away good food from her meals." I would reply, "That's because she's allergic to nuts, Lisa. I've told you before that even the smell of nuts can cause a serious reaction." But Lisa wouldn't listen. She'd say, "That's nonsense, Estella. If you keep babying Julie like this, she'll never outgrow her allergies. You need to expose her to those foods so she can overcome her allergies. What you're doing is wrong. You're depriving her of nutrients and being a bad mother. But I expected that from you." I would explain, "Lisa, we've consulted a pediatrician, and we feed Julie balanced meals. People can live without eating nuts, but Julie will have a severe health issue if she eats them." But Lisa never accepted what I said or what the doctor advised. She was convinced that exposing Julie to nuts was the only way to get rid of the allergies. I was tired of explaining that Julie simply couldn't have food she was allergic to. Lisa would just call me a bad mother and try to convince Julie to eat the foods she was allergic to. Thankfully, Julie knew what could happen if she ate those foods, so she always refused. I decided to talk to Rhett because I was getting more and more worried about Lisa. I told him, "Rhett, I'm having trouble leaving Julie alone with Lisa. She's ignoring my warnings and trying to feed Julie what she wants. I'm afraid she'll sneak some allergens into her food for exposure therapy." Rhett responded, "Don't be ridiculous, Estella. My mom might be old-fashioned, but she knows what she shouldn't do. Besides, Dad is always there to stop her from experimenting. Julie loves spending time with her grandparents. We can't just tell her to stop seeing them." But I insisted, "Lisa isn't changing her attitude about allergies, and I'm really worried about Julie's safety. We need to do something because I'm sick with worry every time Julie is with them without me." Rhett tried to reassure me, saying, "Relax, Estella. There's no need to cut off my parents over something so small. Julie needs the love of her grandparents, and she's happy with them. Since you're so worried, I'll talk to my mom. I'm sure she'll listen to me." Rhett's words were true in one way. Julie really did love her grandparents. I couldn't bear to tell her to stop seeing them. If Julie had ever told me she didn't want to see them, I would have listened. I would have stopped it right away if I had known that no one could control Lisa. Even Rhett couldn't get Lisa to change her ways, and her stubbornness led to terrible consequences for Julie. It all happened at Julie's 10th birthday party. Of course, Vince and Lisa were invited, and they promised to come. Lisa seemed unusually excited about the party, which made me feel uneasy, though I didn't know why. Deep down, I knew something was going to go wrong. Vince and Lisa were among the first guests to arrive, which surprised me since Lisa usually didn't want to spend much time around me. Lisa was carrying a big square box wrapped in birthday-themed paper. She handed it to Julie and said, "Happy birthday, dear Julie. Here's your gift. Grandma has got you the best gift ever." "Thank you so much, Grandma. The gift is so big." "What's in it?" Julie asked excitedly. "I don't know, Julie," Vince replied. "Grandma picked the gift herself and wouldn't even tell me what it is. We'll both find out when you open it. Here, Julie, open Grandma's gift and see what she got you. I'm sure you'll love it. It'll be your absolute favorite." Lisa encouraged. "Really, Grandma? I can't wait to see what you gave me. I'm so excited," Julie said with enthusiasm. "We can open all the gifts after cutting the cake, Julie. Let all your friends come first, And then you can start opening presents, I suggested. No, 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 no. You need to let Julie open my gift before she cuts the cake. That's the whole reason I came early, to give her my gift. Lisa insisted. I started getting suspicious because Lisa was acting strange, but Julie looked so happy to get a nice gift from her grandma. The gift was big and heavy, so she was really eager to open it. Since Julie was so excited, I let her start opening her gifts when all her friends arrived. Lisa had told Julie the gift needed to be opened before the cake, and Julie was really determined to do it that way. I didn't want to make her sad on her birthday, so I agreed. But I had no idea how disastrous it would be. On her birthday, Julie and I were betrayed by the one person we were supposed to trust. Lisa not only ruined Julie's birthday but also turned everyone against her. As soon as Julie opened her gift, she found a big cake inside the box with her name on it. Her happiness lasted only a minute before she suddenly passed out. Rhett and I rushed to our daughter, terrified and confused about what had happened. Then I noticed her throat swelling up and I was in shock. Rhett ran to get the EpiPen while someone else called the police. I knew who was responsible, so I turned to Lisa and demanded, "Lisa, what did you give Julie? What's in that cake?" "Nothing, Estella. It's just a normal cake. I don't understand what happened. You must have done something to make Julie faint. I warned you this would happen because you haven't been giving her proper nutrition." Lisa responded, trying to shift the blame onto me. "Don't try to blame me, Lisa. She was happy and fine just a moment ago, and now she looks like she's having an allergic reaction. Tell me what you did," I shouted, panic rising in my voice. "Lisa, you better not have put something in that cake. I knew I should have kept an eye on you when you promised to get her the best gift ever. Look at Julie, she's turning blue," I yelled, fear gripping my heart. I ignored Lisa and focused on Julie. Rhett came running with the EpiPen, and I quickly used it on our daughter. While the swelling in her throat went down a bit, she was still unconscious. We knew that taking her to the hospital was the only way to save her completely. Everyone in the room was extremely worried about Julie. I had tears in my eyes, and Rhett looked like he was about to cry too. Lisa was already crying and looked a little scared. At that moment, I decided to cut open the cake to find out what was inside. What I found shocked me to my core. Why on earth did you give my daughter a cake filled with nuts? Are you insane, Lisa? I've told you countless times that she's allergic to nuts. What's wrong with you? You ignored my warnings and put nuts in the cake anyway. How could you be so stupid? Lisa tried to defend herself, saying, "I was only trying to help Julie. I didn't mean to hurt her." I hated that Estella was keeping her from eating so much good food. Yes, she might have a bad reaction sometimes, but exposure to nuts would have solved the problem. Rhett was furious and shouted, "Mom, are you freaking insane? My daughter is allergic to nuts. She could have died from this reaction. Who gave you the right to decide how to handle her allergies? Look at what you've done." Lisa, still in denial, said, "I'm her grandmother, Rhett. I have the right to look after my baby. I'm telling you, she'll be fine after a while. You all are overreacting just to scare me and punish me for nothing. I bet this is all Estella's plan to make me look bad." I was livid and warned Lisa, "If I had my way with you today, you'd pay dearly for what you've done. But right now, making sure my daughter is okay is more important." As I finished speaking, the ambulance arrived with the paramedics. They took care of Julie and rushed her to the hospital with us. The doctors there said that Julie would need time to wake up and would have to stay in the hospital for a day or two. I completely broke down in the hospital, crying in Rhett's arms. He held me tight, and we comforted each other. After I pulled myself together, Rhett called Vince to let everyone know that Julie was no longer in danger. When Rhett hung up the call, I looked at him and said, "Rhett, I will never forgive Lisa for what happened today. Do you realize she could have killed our daughter?" Rhett replied, "I've been thinking about it, Estella. Trust me, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. My mother has turned so cruel that I don't even recognize her anymore. Lisa did this just to prove that you're a bad mother. She pretended she wanted Julie to be happy, but she didn't even stop to think that she was putting her in danger. Even after everything, she kept saying that you staged the whole thing. Estella, today I realized how far my mother can go to make you look bad. I can't tell you how sorry I am. I should have limited her presence in our lives a lot sooner. I failed to protect Julie from my mother. I feel like a bad husband and an even worse father, Rhett said, starting to understand the seriousness of the situation. While Vince had been a good grandfather, Lisa had crossed all boundaries that day. She had gotten away with all her previous stunts, but this time we weren't going to let her off easily. My husband and I had a serious discussion about the situation and made a decision right then and there, while Julie was still in the hospital. When we decided to go back home, Vince, Lisa, and a few guests had stayed behind to get updates on Julie's condition. It was the perfect time to confront Lisa. By the time we returned home, it had been 2 hours since the incident. We found Lisa and Vince sitting in the living room. Vince was still scolding Lisa while she ignored him and typed away on her phone. Beside them lay the real birthday cake that Julie didn't even get a chance to cut. The sight brought tears to my eyes again, but I held them back. As soon as they saw us, Vince and Lisa rushed over to us. I said, "Julie is in good hands now, and she will recover soon. She's still unconscious, but the doctors are positive she'll wake up soon." Vince sighed in relief. "Thank God Julie is all right. I was going insane with worry about her condition." But Lisa, still in her delusion, said, "See, there was nothing to worry about. It wasn't even a big deal. Julie will be fine, and her immunity against nuts will improve in no time. Her allergies will be gone. I told you I know what's best." At that moment, Rhett couldn't hold back anymore. He started to yell at Lisa, tearing into her for everything she had done. Vince also joined in, giving Lisa a piece of his mind. The guests were shocked, looking at Lisa with disgust. I was burning with anger too. I said, "Enough is enough, Lisa. We've given you multiple chances to prove yourself, but even after sending my daughter to the hospital, you have no remorse for your actions. This is the last straw. We will never allow you near our or Julie's life again. You are banned from this house too." Lisa snapped back, "You have no right to tell me where I can or cannot go. My son won't allow you to cut me off over nothing. I know this is all you ever wanted, but I won't let you take away my granddaughter just because I don't agree with your parenting. Rhett knows I'm right, and he will support me." But Rhett firmly said, "Absolutely not, Mom. You will never come near me or my family again. Dad is welcome here anytime since he's the only sane grandparent Julie has. He even tried his best to stop you from hurting Julie, but today you sent Julie to the hospital, and you're still claiming you did the right thing. I don't want someone so cruel around my daughter." Lisa couldn't believe her own son was turning against her. She had always trusted Rhett to defend her, but what she didn't realize was that Rhett was a reasonable man, not deluded like her. Even the guests started to berate her, making Lisa realize she had nowhere to turn. Vince wasn't on her side either. She started screaming, "Estella, this is your fault. You set me up to humiliate me, and now you've turned everyone against me. I won't forgive you for this. You should be the one begging for forgiveness. You've ruined your own name and taken yourself away from Julie. You'll never see her again." I calmly replied, "Good luck trying to get grandparents' rights when you're rotting in jail. I bet the judge would find it amusing for a felon to ask for visitation rights after endangering her own granddaughter." Lisa's eyes widened in panic. "What do you mean, Estella? Why would I go to jail? I haven't done anything wrong." "What you did is a crime, Lisa. Exposing a child to allergens knowingly is considered a form of poisoning. I bet you didn't know that, but Rhett and I do, and we've called the police on you. You hear those sirens? They're coming to arrest you." No, you're lying. This can't be happening. You can't get me arrested for this." Lisa was in tears, begging us to drop the charges, but when 2 officers walked in and told her she was under arrest, she started holding onto our hands, pleading not to be sent to jail. Rhett didn't even look at her and told the cops to drag her away. I just gave her a cold stare and told her that her game was up. Lisa then turned to Vince, begging him, "Vince, do something, please. You can't let your wife get arrested like this." But Vince shook his head and said, "When my wife does something truly horrifying and shows no remorse, I will not protect her. Lisa, I've warned you for years to change your ways, but you never listened. Today you put our only granddaughter in danger." Lisa cried, "I was only doing this for her own good. I never knew it would hurt her so badly. Please, Vince, I'm your wife. You need to help me. Rhett has already kicked me out of his life." Vince replied firmly, "Rhett did the right thing, Lisa. In fact, it's what I'm going to do too. Tomorrow, I'm talking to a divorce lawyer. I'm done with you. There's no way I'm staying with a psycho like you anymore. This time, I'm protecting my granddaughter and my kids from your presence. No, 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 Vince, you can't do this to me. I'm your wife. Lisa cried out, but Vince told the cops to take her away. Lisa was crying the entire time, begging for help. The party had ended a long time ago, but now I felt a little bit at peace. Rhett, Vince, and I all returned to the hospital after the guests left. The guests were also angry with Lisa and said they would tell everyone what a horrible person she was. The next day, our little Julie woke up and was doing much better, but she seemed extremely scared of Lisa. She kept crying and begged us to keep Lisa away from her. Mom, Dad, I don't want to be near Grandma again. She always tries to make me eat things that I know will give me allergies. Grandpa stopped her every time, but I don't want to be with Grandma again. Julie, I promise you, Grandma will never hurt you again. She won't be in our lives anymore. You love Grandpa, right? He'll be around, but Grandma won't be near you anymore. It's a promise. Julie was traumatized by what had happened, so we signed her up with a child therapist to help her sort through her emotions. Rhett and I also started couples therapy to improve our communication. We're doing much better as a family now, and it really helps to have a supportive man like Vince around us. Meanwhile, Lisa's life quickly went downhill. When her own family found out about her actions, they scolded her and cut her off. Even her friends were disgusted and didn't want anything to do with her. Lisa was left crying and begging everyone for bail money, but no one helped. Vince filed for divorce the next day, and Lisa was served the papers while she was still in jail. She lost her mind when she received the papers, screaming in her holding cell. Months passed and Vince was able to get an easy divorce from Lisa, thanks to the police report. We live in an at-fault state, so that helped. As for Lisa, she was sent to jail. The judge ordered her to pay us money for medical bills, but since she didn't have any, she got a long sentence. We filed restraining orders against her, so she's legally required to stay away from our family. We're positive she won't be able to come near us again, but if she tries, she'll have to deal with Mama and Papa Bear, who will do anything to protect Julie.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Chen. Growing up, my parents instilled in me the belief that true wealth comes from humility and smart work. While other kids dreamed of being doctors or lawyers, I was captivated by the stock market. By 12, I was devouring investment books and obsessively tracking market trends, much to my parents' bewilderment. Sweetie, maybe you should spend more time with your friends. My mom would suggest, eyeing me over stacks of financial reports. This is fun for me, Mom, I'd reply without looking up. Did you know Warren Buffett bought his first stock at 11? She'd chuckle, shaking her head. Just promise me you won't forget to live while you're planning your empire. That promise grew harder to keep as my hobby turned into a passion and eventually expertise. By 16, I was managing a modest portfolio with my savings and allowance. Winning a full scholarship to study finance at Harvard felt like destiny. At Harvard, I met Michael. He was studying business administration, charming, ambitious, and aiming to climb the corporate ladder. We met during finals week, both reaching for the same economics textbook. Ladies first, he said with a warm smile. I laughed. Thanks, I'm Jennifer. Michael. Maybe we could study together. What began as a shared study session blossomed into daily coffee dates, then a relationship. Unlike others I'd met, Michael admired my ambition. You're going to dominate the business world, he'd say, watching me dissect market trends. Any company would be lucky to have you. What he didn't know was that I wasn't planning to work for anyone else. My scholarship covered everything, so I funneled my earnings into investments. By graduation, my portfolio had grown exponentially. But I kept it quiet. I wanted success on my terms, not as the girl with the trust fund. Michael landed a prestigious job at Sterling Industries, a major tech firm in Boston, while I chose to work independently. When I declined several high-profile offers, Michael was skeptical. Are you sure? He asked. These are dream opportunities. I have my own plans, I replied with a smile. Trust me. A year later, we got married in a modest ceremony. Michael's mother, Patricia, was less than thrilled with my career choice. Investment consulting, she'd sneer. Is that even a real job? I smiled, recalling my parents' advice about staying humble. By then, my portfolio was worth over $50 million, strategically diversified and quietly making me one of Sterling's largest individual shareholders. Though no one, not even Michael, knew. Michael thrived at Sterling, rising through the ranks to work under James Wilson, the arrogant VP of operations. Wilson was infamous for his outdated views, especially about women. The problem with modern marriages, he'd say at company events, is women forgetting their place. Michael would laugh awkwardly, avoiding confrontation. It irritated me, but I let it slide until the annual executive party. Sterling was unveiling restructuring plans, and as a key shareholder, I had a vested interest in attending. "Are you sure you want to come?" Michael asked. "These events can be dull for non-employees." "I think it's time I took a closer look at your work," I replied, carefully applying my makeup. I chose a classic black dress, pearl earrings, and my grandmother's vintage watch, a talisman in every major decision I'd made. The hotel ballroom buzzed with chatter as we arrived. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and the scent of champagne lingered in the air. Michael led me to James Wilson, who was holding court near the bar. "Jennifer." "Michael," James called, raising his glass. We were just discussing Sterling's exciting new direction. "Cutting R&D for short-term profits?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Doesn't innovation drive sustainable growth?" James's smile faltered. "Ah, the little wife has opinions on business, does she?" Laughter rippled through the group. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "She likes to read the financial news," he said quickly. "Honey, maybe we should grab some drinks." But James wasn't done. "Sterling's biggest problem," he announced loudly, "is too many voices from people who don't understand real business, like housewives who think reading the Wall Street Journal makes them experts." The crowd chuckled, but I noticed the CEO, Thomas Richards, watching with interest. My husband, once so proud of my intelligence, stared at his shoes. Before I could speak, a familiar voice interrupted. "Actually, James, you might want to rethink that." Sarah Martinez, my private banker and confidant, stepped forward, her smile sharp. "Should I explain, Jennifer, or would you like to?" James's smug expression faltered. "What's going on here?" I straightened, feeling my grandmother's watch against my wrist. The time had come. "Since you're so concerned about shareholder value, James," I said, my voice calm, "perhaps we should discuss the report I'm presenting at Monday's board meeting, the one outlining why your restructuring plan will fail." James turned crimson. "Board meeting? What are you talking about?" CEO Richards stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Jennifer Chen, JC Holdings." I knew the name sounded familiar. I smiled. Surprise. Strategic anonymity can be a powerful tool. "What's going on?" Michael whispered, his face pale and voice trembling. Sarah stepped forward, her tone cutting through the silence. "Your wife," she announced to the room, "owns 51% of Sterling Industries shares. And no, she doesn't spend her days shopping." The silence hummed for a moment before chaos erupted. James Wilson's face turned a vivid red, cycling through shades I didn't know were possible. Michael looked as though he might faint. "This is absurd," James sputtered. "There must be some mistake." Sarah, ever composed, tapped on her tablet. "I can show you the documentation if you'd like. I have all the records right here." CEO Richards stepped forward, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That won't be necessary, Sarah. I've suspected as much for some time. The board has been impressed with Mrs. Chen's insights and recommendations for years." James turned to him, stunned. "You knew?" "Of course," Richards replied smoothly. "Why do you think your restructuring plan hasn't been approved?" Mrs. Chen raised significant objections. Michael finally found his voice, though it wavered. "Jennifer." "How? When?" I met his wide-eyed gaze. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," I suggested, glancing at the growing crowd of onlookers. "My office is just upstairs," Richards offered. "Shall we?" The elevator ride was oppressively silent. Michael alternated between glancing at me and staring at the floor, while James seethed. Sarah, steady as ever, stood by my side, a quiet but unwavering presence. Richard's office was expansive, with panoramic views of the Boston skyline. As we took our seats, James immediately claimed the chair nearest Richard's desk, as if proximity could restore his authority. Well, Richards began, leaning back in his chair, this has been an eventful evening. Eventful? James exploded. This is outrageous. She can't possibly. She can and does. Sarah interrupted, laying documents on the desk. Jennifer Chen, through carefully managed investment vehicles, controls 51% of Sterling Industries. She's been building her position over the past 5 years. Michael's expression morphed from confusion to hurt. 5 years? But we've been married for 3. I started investing in Sterling before we met. I explained evenly. The company had potential but needed modernization. I saw an opportunity. Modernization? James sneered. Yes, James, I replied calmly. Modernization. Like fostering innovation instead of getting R&D. Like respecting your employees instead of perpetuating a toxic workplace. Richards leaned forward. Mrs. Chen's recommendations have been instrumental in shaping our strategy. Her analysis has consistently outperformed expectations. Michael's voice was barely audible. Why didn't you tell me? I held his gaze. Would it have made a difference? Would you have defended me against James's comments if you'd known I was Sterling's majority shareholder? He flinched, the answer clear without being spoken. This is preposterous, James barked, rising from his chair. I've dedicated 15 years to Sterling. You can't just turn it into a toxic environment where innovation and talent are stifled. I interrupted. James, your restructuring plan would destroy this company. The board won't be supporting it, Richards cut in. In fact, we need to discuss your future with Sterling. My future? James looked stricken. Yes, I said, standing to meet his glare. Your leadership is outdated, your strategies are short-sighted, and your conduct unacceptable. Sterling deserves better. You can't fire me, James shouted. You're just a majority shareholder, Sarah interjected coolly. And yes, she can. Michael remained frozen, his expression unreadable. You told me you were consulting, he murmured. You said it was small scale. I never lied, I said softly. I just didn't tell you everything. Would you have respected my decisions if I had? James erupted again, pointing at Michael. She's tearing us apart. Women like her. That's enough, Richard snapped, his tone sharp. James, you'll receive the details of your separation package tomorrow. Please leave. James stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Sarah excused herself, leaving me alone with Michael and Richards. Mrs. Chen, Richards began, will you be taking a more active role in the company? Yes, I replied firmly, starting with a comprehensive review of our culture and leadership. Michael finally spoke, his voice cracking. And what about us? I turned to him, my voice steady. That depends. Are you ready to see me as an equal, or am I still just the little wife you asked to stay quiet at company events? I need time, he stammered, standing abruptly. This is all too much. He left, and I watched his retreating figure. Richards cleared his throat. Family and business rarely mix well. True, I said, exhaling deeply, but principles shouldn't be compromised. The days that followed were a whirlwind. James's firing made headlines, Sterling Industries, a shakeup at the top. The stock price dipped briefly before recovering as my vision for the company became public. Michael stayed with his parents, processing everything. His mother left a string of hostile voicemails, which I deleted without hesitation. My focus remained on transforming Sterling, revitalizing R&D, implementing work-life balance policies, and fostering innovation. A week later, Michael returned. He looked worn, his usual polish replaced by exhaustion. Can we talk? He asked hesitantly. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat, then immediately stood again, pacing nervously. I've been thinking about everything, he began. About us, about work. And? I prompted. I was wrong, he admitted, his voice low. I let James and others disrespect you. I should have stood up for you. I was so focused on my career that I forgot what really matters. I watched him for a moment before replying. Change doesn't come through words, Michael. It comes through actions. Are you ready to show me that you see me as your equal? He nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. Yes, I am. I waited silently, giving him space to continue. But you weren't completely honest either, Michael added after a moment. You kept such a huge part of your life hidden from me. How are we supposed to have a real marriage with secrets like that? You're right, I admitted, keeping my voice calm. I should have trusted you with the truth. But Michael, ask yourself, why didn't I feel I could? He sank into the chair, his hands running through his hair. Because I showed you I couldn't be trusted. Every time I laughed at James's jokes, every time I told you to stay quiet. I proved I cared more about office politics than supporting my wife. The next few weeks tested everything: my marriage, my resolve, and my ability to steer Sterling Industries through massive change. James Wilson hadn't gone quietly. He hired a lawyer and threatened to sue for wrongful termination, and his allies within the company whispered behind my back. She's tearing down our traditions, they muttered in the break room. This is what happens when you let emotions run a business, others sneered. But facts don't lie. Within a month, employee satisfaction soared by 40%, and R&D, finally free from James's stifling grip, filed 12 patent applications. The stock price climbed steadily, proving that my changes were more than just radical. They were necessary. At home, Michael hovered in a strange limbo, sleeping in the guest room and walking on eggshells around me. His mother, Patricia, however, had no such hesitation. She stormed into our house one afternoon, her designer heels clicking like gunfire. "We need to talk," she announced, barely pausing before stepping into the living room. "By all means," I said dryly, closing the door behind her. "This power trip of yours has gone far enough," she declared, folding her arms. "You've made your point. Now step back and let the men handle business." I raised an eyebrow. "The men? You've humiliated Michael enough already," she snapped. "His colleagues don't know how to treat him anymore. Do you have any idea what this is doing to his career?" "Humiliating?" I repeated. "Like being laughed at during business functions? Like being dismissed as just a housewife?" "That's different." She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "That's just how business works. Men need to." "Need to what, Patricia?" "Undermine women to prop up their egos. Pretend competence doesn't exist if it comes from the wrong gender." "You tricked him," she burst out. "My son married you thinking you were a normal wife, and no. Now what?" Michael's voice cut through the tension, startling us both. "Michael." Patricia turned to him, her expression softening with relief. "Thank goodness you're here. We need to talk sense into her before she destroys everything." But Michael wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on me, filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks: understanding. "Mom," he said evenly, "you need to leave." "What? But?" "Now," he said firmly. After she left, silence settled between us. Michael sank onto the couch, exhaustion etched into his face. "I heard everything," he said quietly, "and I finally realized I've been just like her, treating you like you needed to be managed, not supported. And I'm sorry." I sat down beside him, keeping a cautious distance. "I didn't want to outshine you, Michael. I just wanted your respect as your wife, as a partner, as a person." "You have it," he said softly. "I know I don't deserve your trust right now, but I want to earn it. Not because of your money or your power, but because I love you. And I want to be the partner you deserve." My phone buzzed, breaking the moment. It was Sarah. "Jennifer," she said when I answered, "James has withdrawn his lawsuit. Word about Sterling's latest quarterly projections has spread, and they're impressive." "Send me the details," I said with a smile. "And Sarah, thank you for everything." When I hung up, Michael asked, "Good news?" "James is backing down." I confirmed. "It seems success really is the best revenge." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "What happens now?" "With Sterling and with us." "Sterling will keep evolving," I replied. "We're rolling out a new parental leave policy and launching a mentorship program for women in tech next month." "And us?" he asked, his voice hesitant. I took a deep breath. "That depends. Are you ready for a marriage of equals? Really ready?" "I'd like to try," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Starting with moving out of the guest room, if you're okay with that. It's killing my back." I laughed, surprising myself. "We'll need couples counseling, and you'll have to stand up to your mother." "Done," he said, grinning. "Though maybe we should have dinner with her next week. I'd love to see her face when you explain your women's leadership initiative." For the first time in weeks, I felt real hope for our future.
Where are you right now? Are you safe? I asked Jesus, worried about him being near a fire. But he seems annoyed and tells me he's at work before hanging up. I'm puzzled because it doesn't make sense for him to be working near a fire. When I realize he's not where he said he was, I start to suspect him of lying. I've been planning something for a while now, and it's time to put my plan into action. My name is Julia Bones, and I'm 29 years old. I work as a nurse in a hospital where I help many patients every day. I've always been good at caring for others, and I find joy in it. Nursing feels like my true calling. I'm married to Jace, and we've been happily married for 2 years. We live in company housing provided by his job, and I cherish our life together. I met Jace 3 years ago at a party where some friends were hanging out. Jace, who tends to get shy, drank a lot and ended up getting drunk pretty quickly. Even though we had just met, I couldn't leave him alone in that state, so I took care of him at my place. The next day, Jace didn't remember anything, but he said something serious like, "I'll take responsibility," which made me burst into laughter. I had to explain to him what happened, and he felt embarrassed and apologized. That's how our relationship started, and we got married a year later. Now, as we're nearing our 3rd year of marriage, we haven't had any kids yet, but I believe we can create a loving family together. Lately, Jace has been really busy with work, especially on weekends, and he often comes home acting distant. Even when we're relaxing together on the couch watching TV, he's always glued to his phone, sighing a lot. At first, I wondered if I did something to upset him, but I couldn't think of anything. As time went on, I started to worry about his health, so I began researching balanced meals and cooking healthier meals for his lunches and dinners. That day, my hospital had 2 shifts, day and night. I was supposed to work the night shift, but a colleague asked me to switch to the day shift, so I did. I meant to tell Jace about the change, but I ended up telling him on the day itself. I messaged him, saying, "I'm working the day shift today, so I'll cook dinner and wait for you," but he took a while to reply. Normally, he'd respond quickly and even use emojis, but lately his replies have been short. I wondered if he was just busy or if this was normal after being married for 2 years. Feeling a bit lonely, I rushed home after work to cook a good meal again. Cooking went really well today. I took a quick photo of the meal and posted it on my cooking account on social media. I enjoy cooking for Jace, but sharing my cooking on social media has become something I like too. A few minutes after posting, I got a notification, a comment from one of my cooking friends. I've been chatting with someone I met through my cooking account on social media lately. It's nice to have a connection outside of work, and it makes me happy. While I was chatting online, Jace came home from work. I quickly reheated the food I made and said, "Welcome home. Dinner's ready. Was your day busy again?" "Thanks, yeah, I guess I am. I'm pretty tired," Jace replied, changing into his comfy clothes and sinking into his chair, looking exhausted. I brought the reheated food over to him. "Yeah, a colleague needed my help with something urgent. Sorry I didn't tell you earlier," I explained as I sat down at the table to eat. "Let's dig in." "It's okay. It was last minute, but just let me know sooner next time. Sometimes I make plans to hang out with coworkers," Jace said. "Ah, got it," I replied, noticing Jace hadn't been eating much. "Is the food not to your liking? Did I mess up the flavors?" I asked, concerned. Jace stopped mid-bite and looked at me with an awkward expression. "No, it's not that. I just don't feel hungry right now." "Sorry, I'll save it for breakfast tomorrow," Jace said, forcing a laugh. "Thanks for cooking, though." He stood up from the table and headed towards the bathroom, leaving more than half of the food untouched, just as I suspected. I followed him to the bathroom. "Hey, are you feeling all right? You haven't seemed yourself lately. I'm worried about you. Maybe you should see a doctor," I suggested. Jace, brushing his teeth, rinsed his mouth and chuckled at my concern. "I'm okay. Maybe I just need to get back into exercising. I'm going for a walk now." "Okay," Jace said, straightening himself up and quickly making his way to the front door. "I'll be fine. he reassured as he declined my offer to join him. Even more worried, I decided to secretly follow him outside, just in case he needed help if something happened. Though that's what I told myself, deep down, there was another worry brewing in my heart. To my surprise, Jace walked briskly and stopped at a park not far from our house. He looked around and appeared to be texting someone on his phone. Soon, a white car pulled up, and Jace approached it. He exchanged a few words with the person inside, a young woman with long curly hair, giving off a flirtatious vibe. I instinctively took out my phone and snapped a photo. Before I could fully comprehend what was happening, Jace got into the car, and they drove off together. Shock, confusion, suspicion, and a whirlwind of emotions filled my mind, leaving me frozen in place. Then, a message from Jace came. Met a friend unexpectedly. I'll be home late. A friend? The image of him with the woman lingered in my mind, and I couldn't bring myself to believe his explanation. That night, Jace didn't come home until after 1 a.m., and my anxiety was through the roof. Tears streaming down my face, I showed him the photo I had taken. When he saw the photo, Jace froze for a moment, then quickly brushed it off with a laugh. Oh, I just bumped into a client salesperson while I was out walking. I was just giving them some advice, nothing more. Please trust me, he pleaded, looking at me with a sad expression, as if he was the victim, shutting down any further questions. After that, Jace's work became incredibly hectic, and I found myself working overtime often when I was on the day shift. Despite our conflicting schedules, I tried to bring up the incident from before, but he always brushed it off with excuses like, I'm tired, I worked late yesterday, or I'm working on my day off today, really. During work, whenever I relaxed, thoughts of Jace and that woman being close would creep into my mind, making me feel uneasy. After finishing my night shift, the morning sun felt harsh on my tired eyes. I realized I hadn't been taking care of myself lately because of all the worry and anxiety. So, I decided to stop by a cake shop that opened early in the morning and bought myself a cake. With my mood slightly lifted, I left the store and took a different route home. There were many hotels in the area, and I often saw couples who seemed to be up to something. But maybe because it was early morning, the area was quiet. As I walked carefully to avoid damaging the cake, thoughts like, I have some tea at home, maybe we can enjoy it together, crossed my mind. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a young man and woman coming out of a hotel on the opposite sidewalk. I glanced over casually, but then I froze. There was Jace, with his sleepy smile, and the woman with the long curly hair from the car that day smiling back at him. The cake slipped from my hand and splattered on the ground. In that moment, all I could think about was gathering evidence. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and snapped a picture of them arm in arm, smiling at each other. They looked like a couple in the photo. My heart raced, and I broke out in a cold sweat, realizing that Jace had been lying to me. All I could see was the fallen cake box and the damning photo of them staring back at me. In the back of my mind, I knew I couldn't stay with him anymore. One day, after a series of events confirmed my suspicions about Jace, the word divorce started to feel like a real possibility. I was working my usual day shift, busy with tasks. Suddenly, I heard sirens in the distance, signaling that fire trucks were passing through the neighborhood. It wasn't just one truck, but 2 or 3 in a row, which made me worry that there might be a fire nearby. After finishing a phone call and taking a moment to catch my breath, 2 colleagues returned from a patient's room, discussing how frightening it was. Good job. What's going on? I asked, sensing there might be trouble. They lowered their voices and told me there's a fire at Company A. A patient we passed in the hall mentioned it. Company A? A fire? Those words sent a shiver down my spine. Excusing myself from my colleagues and clutching my phone tightly, I hurried to a quiet spot. Company A, where the fire was reported, was where Jace worked. With a sense of dread, I called Jace. Like every morning, I had seen him off to work. Since the events that had unfolded, we hardly saw each other at home and rarely spoke. but I never missed saying goodbye to him in the morning. "Please pick up," I whispered to myself, hoping Jace would answer. After several rings, I heard his voice on the other end, asking, "Hello? Where are you? Are you okay?" Despite my half-shouted relief, Jace sounded annoyed. "What's going on all of a sudden? I'm at work, you know. Don't call me during work hours," he grumbled before hanging up abruptly. All I heard was the end of call beep in my ear. While I was glad to know Jace wasn't in the fire, I felt a deep unease. It didn't make sense for him to be working, as if nothing was happening. His dismissive attitude towards my concern only added to my frustration. He probably wasn't at work at all. I saw him off to what I thought was his workplace, but it must have been somewhere else. Maybe all this time, without realizing it, I've been seeing him off to another woman's place. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw shimmering long curly hair. With determination, I dialed a certain person's number on my clenched phone. After finishing my work safely, I rushed home and started packing up the furniture and appliances in the house. Then the doorbell rang, ding-dong. But it wasn't Jace at the door. It was a friend from college who knew about my situation with Jace and had offered to help me leave. Despite my sudden request for help moving my belongings from work, she readily agreed. "Thank you so much. I'll treat you to something next time," I said, feeling apologetic. But she just smiled and replied, "You've been through a lot, haven't you? I'm always here to help." I felt grateful for having such a good friend, a feeling that had faded recently, and my heart warmed. Together, we moved out the furniture, appliances, and clothes I had prepared into the car. The room, now empty of the belongings I had accumulated since my single days, felt stark and bare. Looking around, I questioned if I had any lingering attachments to my past life. "No, I don't need it anymore," I decided, feeling no pull to stay. With determination, I headed towards an apartment near my workplace. On the day I saw Jace leaving a hotel with another woman, I had rushed to a real estate agent. I wasn't sure about divorce yet, but I had rented the apartment just in case. I felt satisfied with my decision. I unpacked the items in the apartment and then remembered something. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number, waiting for the robotic voice guidance to start. Hours later, after settling in from the move, I was taking a break when I received a call. Glancing at the display, I saw Jace's name. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello. Julia, where are you? I came home to an empty house, and my phone isn't working. What's going on?" Jace's voice sounded frantic. "Most of the stuff at home belonged to me, so I took it with me. And as for the phone, it was in my name, so I canceled it," I calmly explained. His voice remained anxious. "Wait, my phone isn't working." "Well, I can only use Line because I'm connected to Wi-Fi. But more importantly, you said you took the stuff. You're not seriously running away, are you? This is a joke, right?" Jace's voice was filled with disbelief. As I listened to Jace still not grasping the situation, my irritation grew. "Are you seriously saying that? Don't tell me you forgot about the call this afternoon. Someone who's at work can't just keep working calmly when there's a fire happening, right?" Struggling to control my anger, I asked something I had wanted to know for a long time. "Where were you and who were you with instead of going to work?" There was a moment of silence from Jace. Then, reluctantly, he began to speak. "Look, the story about bumping into a female client while walking, it was a lie. The truth is, she's a colleague from work, and I was at her place today." "What?" Jace's confession was exactly what I had anticipated. He had been involved with the company receptionist, Savannah, for about 6 months. They would meet on the days I worked the night shift. Lately, as Savannah became more demanding, he had started lying about working overtime on his days off just to see her. Today, they had both taken paid leave and spent the day at Savannah's house. They only found out about the fire when Savannah's phone rang with a call from their office. After confessing everything, Jace pleaded over the phone, "I want you to forgive me." "What a joke," I thought bitterly. "I'm glad to finally hear the truth from you, Jace," I said. Despite our short marriage, I had been trying to build a good family life. Jace tried to interrupt, but I didn't let him. I want a divorce because of your infidelity. Let's handle the details through our lawyers. Goodbye." Afterwards, the fire at company made headlines in the local news, becoming a big story. When I saw the news, I was stunned. The culprit behind the fire was none other than Jace's mistress, Savannah. Early in the morning, Savannah sneaked into the company's conference room, pulled a thread from the edge of a curtain, and lit it with a lighter. The fire spread quickly, burning down the conference room. Thankfully, the building itself suffered only minor damage. Surveillance footage clearly showed Savannah as the perpetrator. As for her motive, Savannah claimed that the married man she was dating wouldn't divorce his wife, and even her threats of exposing their relationship had no effect. She believed she had to do something drastic. Honestly, I couldn't understand why anyone would commit a crime just to be with Jace. However, according to Savannah's colleagues, she often complained about feeling lonely. Perhaps she envied the married man who seemed to have it all, thinking that being with him would fill her own loneliness. Thinking about it, I realized that feeling lonely even when you're with someone else is far more painful. Since discussing divorce with Jace, we hadn't been in direct contact, but our lawyers were handling the proceedings. Meanwhile, I heard about what was happening at Jace's company. After the fire, Jace, who was unaware of what had happened, was shocked to learn the truth from the company's general affairs representative. Savannah was arrested immediately, and news of their relationship spread rapidly throughout the company. Unable to bear the gossip any longer, Jace resigned from his job. Hearing about all this, I felt a tiny bit of sympathy for Jace, but mostly, I believed he had brought it upon himself by choosing another woman. With that in mind, I went through the divorce process without much emotion, and we successfully divorced. The evidence of Jace's infidelity, captured in the photos I had taken, made the process smooth. Additionally, I ensured that Jace paid proper alimony from his severance pay. Now that my connection with Jace was completely severed, I enjoyed living alone in my new apartment, where I had settled in nicely. Perhaps I had neglected myself by always prioritizing others. While continuing my job as a nurse, I started to rediscover the joy of cooking, which had been my greatest pleasure during my marriage with Jace, but now just for myself. In the morning, I opened the window of my apartment to let in the fresh air. Glancing outside, I saw a happy family of 3 walking together. Seeing them, I felt no regret at all. Instead, I felt excited thinking about my future. Just then, my phone buzzed. Returning to my room, I couldn't help but smile at the screen. I had hit it off with someone I met through a cooking account on social media, and we had become close quickly. We had planned to cook together that day. Responding to the message saying, "I'll be there soon," I began preparing the meal we were going to cook.
I never intended to hide my success. Life has an uncanny way of revealing people's true colors when they believe you have nothing to offer. My name is Emma Chen, and I've always known that appearances can deceive. Growing up in a modest apartment above my parents' tiny grocery store in San Francisco's Chinatown, I watched them pour their lives into 14-hour workdays just to ensure there was food on our table and a chance for me to succeed. Their lessons shaped me. True worth isn't measured by wealth, but by character and determination. Emma, mai tin du shaik sin dijihui, my mother would say every morning as she straightened my collar, her hands worn from labor but tender as silk. Each day is a new opportunity. While my peers were playing video games or watching TV, I was helping stock shelves, learning inventory management, and poring over accounting books. My father's old calculator became my toy, and numbers my steadfast companion. But beyond the math, I absorbed the ethos of their work. Respect every customer, no matter what they could afford. Treat everyone like family, my father would say. You never know their story. Their sacrifices bore fruit when I earned a full scholarship to Stanford's business school. The day I received my acceptance letter, my mother cried, and my father closed the store early for the first time in 2 decades. We celebrated with a feast of dumplings and my mother's special red bean soup. At Stanford, I worked relentlessly, channeling the grit my parents had instilled in me. Between classes, I developed an innovative supply chain management system that caught the eye of Genesis Tech, a rising Silicon Valley powerhouse. Your algorithm could transform global distribution. Marcus Sterling, their CEO, said during my final presentation. We'd love for you to join us after graduation. The offer was beyond anything I'd imagined. A senior position with significant stock options. But I surprised Marcus by requesting to start in operations instead, learning the business from the ground up, just like I had in my parents' store. Most people want to start at the top, Marcus remarked, his curiosity piqued. I want to earn it, I replied. How can I lead if I don't understand the foundations? Impressed, he agreed. Officially, I was Senior Vice President of Operations, but few colleagues knew my true title, a secret I preferred. That's how I met James. One rainy Tuesday morning in the company cafeteria, I was immersed in inventory reports when someone jostled my table, nearly spilling my coffee. Oh no, I'm so sorry. A tall man with kind eyes and a crooked tie scrambled to steady the cup. I swear, I'm usually more coordinated. Laughing, I replied, no harm done. I'm Emma. James Wilson. His warm smile tugged at something in me. Let me make it up to you. Coffee's on me. One coffee led to lunch, then dinner, and soon we were inseparable. James worked in marketing, his creative flair complementing my analytical nature. He loved hearing about my work in operations, always curious about my day. You don't just see problems, he said one evening as we strolled along the bay. You see solutions. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. It wasn't until we began planning the wedding that I encountered his mother, Victoria Wilson. Our first meeting took place in their Pacific Heights mansion, a monument to old money. Victoria greeted me from atop a marble staircase, her demeanor icy. So, she began surveying me through designer glasses. You work in operations? She practically spat the word. Yes, I said evenly, offering no further explanation. And your parents? They own a grocery store in Chinatown. Small business owners, she murmured, exchanging a look with her husband. Well, everyone has to start somewhere. James squeezed my hand but said nothing. A red flag I chose to ignore. In the weeks leading up to our wedding, Victoria's subtle digs and overt meddling became routine. She dismissed my preferences as charmingly simple and insisted on orchestrating everything. Darling, she'd say, patting my hand as if consoling a child. Leave it to those who understand these things. Even my wedding dress, a modern design with traditional Chinese accents, became a point of contention. But dear at the street Francis, wouldn't you prefer something more appropriate? This is appropriate, I replied firmly. It honors both cultures. She pursed her lips. Well, I suppose it's your decision. Though James's first girlfriend, Caroline, always had such elegant taste. European, you know. James, yet again, said nothing. Despite Victoria's interference, the wedding was beautiful. My parents sat in the front row, tears glistening in their eyes. Meanwhile, Victoria held court, regaling her bridge club with tales of James' accomplished cousins. Of course, not everyone marries up, I overheard her say, her tone dripping with disdain. Post-wedding life didn't ease the tension. Monthly family dinners became tests of patience as Victoria's barbs continued. Emma, dear, could you help the housekeeper clear the table? You must feel more at home in the kitchen. Or, James, Caroline just made partner at her law firm. Isn't it inspiring when people reach their full potential? By Christmas, Victoria announced a grand holiday dinner, emphasizing, everyone who matters will be there. Everyone who matters, I echoed. Yes, well, you understand. Family. James stared into his wine glass, silent as always. What Victoria didn't know was that her Christmas dinner would unravel her assumptions in ways she could never predict. But that's a story for another time. We arrived at the Wilson mansion at exactly 6 o'clock. True to form, Victoria had spared no expense. Thousands of twinkling white lights adorned the 3-story facade, and an enormous wreath with a gold bow graced the front door. Through the frosted windows, I glimpsed a dining room that looked like a luxury magazine spread, complete with towering floral arrangements and gleaming crystal. James, Emma, Victoria greeted us, her smile just as polished and cold as the silverware inside. She wore an elegant designer gown, undoubtedly more expensive than what she imagined I earned in a year. James, darling, everyone's gathered in the living room. Emma, perhaps you could lend a hand in the kitchen with the appetizers. Mom, James began, but I touched his arm lightly. It's fine, I said, my voice calm. Victoria's lips curled in a smug smile. So considerate. That's what we love about her, isn't it, James? Always willing to pitch in. James offered a weak laugh and followed her into the living room, leaving me alone in the hallway. In the kitchen, I found Maria, the Wilsons' housekeeper of 15 years, commanding a small team with the precision of a general. When she spotted me, her warm smile reached her eyes. Mrs. Emma, what are you doing in here? You're a guest. Apparently not, I replied with a wry smile. Still, I rolled up my sleeves and began helping her arrange the smoked salmon canapes. The doorbell chimed again, followed by Victoria's delighted exclamations as more guests arrived. Among the voices, one stood out, Caroline. Of course, James' ex-girlfriend had somehow found her way onto the guest list. When it was time for dinner, Maria and I carried the appetizers into the formal dining room. The sight that greeted me was as grand as I'd imagined. A massive table set for 24, each place adorned with Waterford crystal and antique silver. Name cards, written in Victoria's flowing calligraphy, marked every seat. I walked the perimeter of the table, scanning for my name. It wasn't there. Oh, Emma, Victoria's voice rang out, syrupy with fox concern. We're just a bit tight on space at the main table. I'm sure you understand. Family comes first. Why don't you join Maria in the kitchen? You two seem to get along so well. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to me, some curious, others uncomfortable. Caroline's smirk was barely concealed behind her champagne glass. James's father, Richard, cleared his throat. Perhaps we can fit another chair. Nonsense, Victoria interrupted smoothly. Emma understands. She's used to more casual settings. My cheeks burned, but I forced a neutral expression. Years of handling tough negotiations had taught me the value of composure. Of course, Victoria, whatever makes you comfortable. As I turned to leave, I caught James's gaze. He looked uneasy but said nothing. Something inside me hardened. Back in the kitchen, Maria wrung her hands. Mrs. Emma, this isn't right. Let me speak to Mrs. Wilson. It's fine, I said, pulling out my phone and sending a quick text. I sat at the small kitchen table and opened my laptop. At least let me fix you a plate, Maria insisted. Thank you, Maria, but I have some urgent work to handle. Major supply chain issue. I offered a reassuring smile as I reviewed the data Marcus had sent. The problems in Asia were more severe than I'd hoped, but not insurmountable. From the dining room came the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Victoria's voice floated above the rest, recounting tales from James's childhood. Caroline chimed in with anecdotes from their high school days. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The doorbell rang again. Maria moved to answer it, but I stopped her. That's for me. I opened the door to find Marcus Sterling, CEO of Genesis Tech, standing in his signature tailored suit, a look of mild concern on his face. Emma, he greeted me warmly. Apologies for intruding on your Christmas dinner, but we need your input on the Asia situation. Of course, I said, gesturing for him to come in. Though technically, I'm not at the dinner table. His brow furrowed. Not at the table. Why not? Why don't we find out together? We walked into the dining room, where the hum of conversation stopped abruptly. 24 heads swiveled toward us, curiosity and confusion etched on their faces. Victoria stood quickly, her expression hard to read. I'm so sorry, sir. The help isn't supposed to let visitors in unannounced. Emma, you should know better. Marcus blinked, then turned to me. Help? I'm confused. Why is my senior vice president of operations eating in the kitchen? The silence was deafening. Victoria's face drained of color. Senior? Vice president? Yes, Marcus said, oblivious to, or perhaps enjoying, the tension. Emma's leadership has been pivotal to Genesis Tech's success. Her supply chain system is groundbreaking. Surely her husband has mentioned her accomplishments. All eyes turned to James, who looked like he might faint. I didn't know, he stammered. You never asked, I said quietly. Caroline's champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. No one moved to clean it up. But you work in operations. Victoria sputtered. You said. I do, I replied, my tone calm. As the senior vice president, I chose to start at the ground level, just as my parents did in their modest grocery store. Marcus nodded approvingly. Speaking of which, Emma, your mother's dumplings are extraordinary. The board loved them at our last meeting. Victoria collapsed into her chair, her shock plain. Board meetings? Yes. Marcus continued. Emma's one of our youngest board members. Her stock options alone are worth. Marcus, I interjected gently. Perhaps we should handle the Asia situation elsewhere. I wouldn't want to disrupt the family dinner. I turned to Victoria, my gaze steady. Thank you for making my place in this family so abundantly clear. It's helped me make some important decisions. Emma, wait, James said, finally standing. We need to talk about this. We do, I agreed. But not tonight. Tonight, I have a company to run. As I left, I paused. Oh, and Victoria, those dumplings you dismissed last month? They were a hit at our last gala, $200 per plate, quite the success with the governor. Marcus and I walked out into the crisp night air. As we approached his car, he glanced at me. I've been wondering how long you'd let them treat you like that. I smiled faintly. Sometimes it's better to let people show you who they really are. And James? That's a decision for another day. As the car pulled away, my phone buzzed relentlessly with messages. From James, from Richard, even one from Caroline. But the one from Victoria stood out. Emma, dear, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I turned off my phone. Asia needed my attention, and my life needed a fresh perspective. As my mother always said, each day is a new opportunity, and tonight, I'd seized mine. The next morning, I woke up in my private office at Genesis Tech, the resolution to the Asia crisis neatly tucked away in my outbox. A late-night video conference with our Shanghai partners and decisive action had steered the company away from disaster. As sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Mrs. Chen. Sarah, my assistant, peeked in. Your husband is in the lobby. Again. This is his third attempt since dawn. I sighed and glanced at my phone. 47 missed calls, 93 texts, and an avalanche of emails. Victoria alone had sent 28 increasingly frantic messages. Send him up, Sarah. It's time we talked. When James walked in, he looked nothing like his usual polished self. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and his tie was nowhere to be seen. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the sleek office, the awards on the walls, and the panoramic view of the bay. Emma, he began, his voice hesitant. This is really your office. For the past 2 years, I replied, motioning for him to sit. Not that you ever asked. He sank into one of the visitor chairs, his gaze dropping. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That I'm more than the girl your mother looks down on. That I've built a career while you stood by and said nothing. When exactly was I supposed to do that, James? In between your mother's jabs or your silence? He winced. Mom's difficult. Difficult? I repeated, crossing my arms. She made me eat in the kitchen on Christmas, and you let her. I was going to say something. But you didn't. You never do. My voice was calm but firm. 2 years, James. 2 years of watching you laugh at your mother's jokes about my background. 2 years of staying silent while she paraded Caroline in front of me. 2 years of you being ashamed of me, or at least of what you thought I was. I wasn't ashamed, he protested. Weren't you? Then why didn't you ever ask about my work? Why didn't you visit me here? Why didn't you defend me? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. The board approved your Asia strategy, he said. Stocks up 12% already. Excellent work. Thank you, Marcus. I'll finalize the timeline today. When I hung up, James stared at me, his face pale. You report directly to Marcus Sterling. I have for years, I said, my tone matter of fact. Remember last Christmas when I missed your mother's party because of overtime? I was in Tokyo, finalizing a $1 billion deal, but you assumed I was working a shift at a warehouse. Emma, I didn't know, he pleaded. Please, give me another chance. I shook my head. That's the problem, James. Now that you know I'm successful, you want to make things right. What about when you thought I was just a grocery store girl? Didn't I deserve respect then? The silence between us was deafening, and in it, I found my answer. A knock on the door interrupted us. Sarah appeared again, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Wilson is here. She's insistent. I nodded. Sent her in. Victoria swept in, dressed impeccably as always, though her usual composure was absent. Her eyes flitted around the room, widening as they landed on my credentials and accolades. Emma, darling, she began, her voice sticky sweet. We need to clear up this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I arched an eyebrow. You mean where you made me eat in the kitchen, or where you've spent 2 years treating me like I was beneath you? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I didn't know who you were. And that, I said sharply, is the root of the problem. You judge me based on my parents' grocery store. Tell me, Victoria, how much do you think Genesis Tech paid for my supply chain system? She blinked, floundering. I don't. $300 million. Before I even graduated. That modest store taught me everything about respect and hard work. Concepts you still haven't grasped. Emma, James interjected, people can change. Give us a chance to make this right. I opened my laptop, revealing an email from my lawyer. 2 years, James. I've given you plenty of chances. I met his gaze. I'm filing for divorce. Victoria gasped. You can't. Think of James's future. I am, and mine. I stood. The prenup you insisted on. It protects my assets as much as his. And the Pacific Heights mansion. I bought it last year. Check the property records. James sank back, stunned. All this time, while you let your mother belittle me, I was building something real. I pressed a button on my desk. Sarah, please escort Mrs. Wilson out. James, you have until Friday to move your things to your parents' house. Emma, think of what people will say. Victoria exclaimed as security arrived. They'll say what I should have said years ago. Respect isn't earned by a bank account. It's earned by treating people with dignity. I turned to James. Your mother spent 2 years trying to make me feel small. She only succeeded in showing me how small she is. As they left, I stood by the window, watching the fog roll over the bay. A text from my mother appeared on my phone. Mai tan du shaik sin de jihui. Each day is a new opportunity. Smiling, I drafted a press release about Genesis Tech's triumph. The stock would close at a record high that day. But my true success wasn't in the numbers. It was in knowing I'd reclaimed my self-worth. 6 months later, I closed another quarterly report. The divorce was final, the house sold, and Victoria had a new cautionary tale for her bridge club. None of it mattered anymore. Sarah knocked. Mrs. Chen, your parents are here for lunch. I closed my laptop, smiling. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And the best revenge? It's not served cold in a kitchen. It's served in a corner office, surrounded by those who saw your worth all along. I started when I found out the truth. It surprised me, and I felt thankful to my father-in-law. It also made me feel free. My name's Charlotte, born in April, with a name that reminds you of blooming flowers. It's been 45 years since then. I've spent my life taking care of my family as a wife and mom, enjoying every day. But there were troubles beyond my family. Back then, my family was all I needed for happiness. I met my husband, Joseph, at a club in college. We hit it off, started dating, and eventually got married. We have a son, but he works in the city and only comes home every 6 months. So it's mostly just Joseph and me now. We used to love going back to places we visited when we were dating. How about Six Flags tomorrow on our day off? Joseph suddenly asked. Caught off guard, I tried to remember what happened 23 years ago at that amusement park. Let me think. Oh, I remember. After riding the teacups, I got dizzy and fell into a nearby pond. That's right, I was so embarrassed. I almost wish I didn't know you. You're so mean. Why did you let go of my hand then? We laughed about my embarrassing moment, making it a cherished memory. Even when it was just the two of us at home, we never lost our cheerful spirit. We had a happy life. Joseph's work shifts meant we sometimes didn't see much of each other. but I adjusted my schedule to match his, so I rarely felt lonely. Then, something major happened that would change everything. Our father-in-law was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. The surgery was tough, and the chances of survival were very low. It was a terrible illness. Both Joseph and I were filled with anger, clenching our fists in frustration. When a loved one gets seriously ill, you feel lost, not knowing what to do. Joseph's sister lived in the next town over, but she didn't know about this yet. Joseph decided to call her. After 7 rings, a loud, shrill voice answered the phone. "Why are you calling at this hour?" "I'm busy making dinner," she grumbled when Joseph called her. "We need to talk about something important." "We'll come over tomorrow evening," Joseph replied, ignoring her complaints. Even though she wasn't thrilled about the sudden visit, there were more important things to worry about. After giving her the necessary information, Joseph hung up. Normally, Joseph didn't pay much attention to his carefree sister-in-law. She rarely showed up at family events and didn't really get along with him. But this time was different. The next day, we quickly took time off and went to her house. When we rang the doorbell, her husband, who wasn't the friendliest person, answered first. He opened the door with a stern expression, giving us an intimidating look. It wasn't a welcoming sight. In the living room, she gave us a cold stare. Even though we hadn't seen each other in 6 months, she treated us worse than strangers. Amidst the tension, Joseph fixed his intense gaze on her. As he told her about their father's illness, she said something shocking. "So what? Are you blaming Dad for getting sick? You didn't come here expecting me to take care of him, did you?" Instead of feeling sad about her father's illness, she seemed more worried about inconvenience to herself. It was the first time I saw a daughter disrespect her sick father like that, and I felt embarrassed for her as a fellow human being. My anger rose, and even my parents, who had planned to speak calmly, were getting frustrated. "That's too much. You're his daughter, aren't you? Even if a loved one is suffering, you can't be so cold. If the situation were reversed, you would definitely be upset." I hoped she would think about what I said and calm down. But I was wrong. "Don't lecture me. There's no rule saying I have to care for him just because I'm his daughter. If you're so worried, why don't you do it? Joseph is his child too." True, Joseph is also his father's child, so it's unfair to expect his sister to shoulder all the responsibility when she's being so irresponsible. I thought she should step up and help out during this tough time. But people like her are good at finding excuses. What she said wasn't entirely wrong, and I realized it was pointless to argue further. So I let it go, even though we didn't want to league our father-in-law to his daughter, who clearly didn't want to deal with it. As a working couple, we didn't have the time. Unlike her, I found fulfillment in my job, and if Joseph had to quit, it would strain our finances. As I weighed my options, my sister-in-law revealed her trump card with a smug look on her face. "Hey Charlotte, you have a nursing certification, right? You know more than me, a total amateur. It'd be best if you took care of him. Patients feel better with a professional, don't they?" I had worked as a certified nursing assistant, CNA, in a nursing home 15 years ago, and got certified so I could care for my parents if needed, since I'm an only child. Knowing it would be pointless to argue with my sister-in-law further, we decided to go home and think things over. "I'm sorry you have such an uncaring and troublesome sister-in-law. She's not the type to listen even if I spoke up, so I didn't say anything." "It's all right. I knew no matter what you said, it wouldn't change anything." "It's not your fault, Joseph. What should we do?" I asked. "I know you love your job, and I don't want to take that away from you just because my dad got sick. But seeing Joseph care so much about me made me happy. Unlike my sister, I'm not heartless. I want to cherish every moment with my dad," Joseph replied. "Don't worry about me. I'll figure out my job situation later. What matters most is that I met you because of your dad." "I'm grateful for that," I said, holding Joseph's hand as I saw the regret in his eyes. "Let's face this together," I continued, seeing Joseph's expression lighten a bit. "The biggest problem here is money, right?" While talking with Joseph, we discovered that my father-in-law had only signed up for the cheapest insurance available. That meant we have to pay for most of his care out of our own pockets. "While his daughters definitely won't offer to chip in," Joseph said, "they should be contributing more if they're not going to help take care of him." Their lack of reliability was disheartening, even though I hadn't expected much from them to begin with. Taking care of a sick person requires finding motivation when you're at your lowest. It's not an easy task. It felt like a battle with myself, The next day, I made the tough decision to leave my job in the bar kitchen, where I enjoyed working with the younger staff. When I explained the situation, everyone understood, though they were disappointed to see me go. "Please come back when you can," they said. Their words gave me strength and became my motivation for the challenges ahead. With that, I headed straight to the hospital where my father-in-law was waiting. When I arrived, I saw my father-in-law sitting quietly with his back to the entrance. I couldn't tell if he was looking out the window or sleeping, but his loneliness and sadness were palpable, and I couldn't find the right words to speak. After about 30 seconds, I took a deep breath and approached him. As I tried to gather my thoughts, my father-in-law spoke first. "Charlotte, thank you for coming. I'm sorry to be such a burden," my father-in-law said, his face softening as he greeted me. Then a look of worry crossed his face, his expression darkening. Despite his illness, he was so considerate. It angered me that his own daughter, my sister-in-law, couldn't be bothered to be here. "Please let me know if there's anything I can do for you," I replied. I knew I couldn't understand the pain of his illness, but I wanted to support him as best as I could. After finishing my morning tasks, I made the 40-minute journey to the hospital every day. I used to drive to work, but now I took the bus to spend more time with my father-in-law, even if it meant less sleep. The bus rides were calming, giving me a brief break and some energy for the tough days ahead. As I watched my father-in-law's health decline, I poured my heart and energy into making him comfortable. The medical procedures, like IVs and medication, were necessary but complicated. Unlike a simple IV for a cold, he needed a catheter placed near his heart through surgery below his collarbone. It was distressing, but it was the best we could do since he wasn't a candidate for surgery. "Try this," I said, handing him a Walkman. My father-in-law loved karaoke and used to practice daily, but his hospitalization had stopped that. I wanted him to keep his passion for music alive, so I loaded his favorite songs onto the Walkman as a gift. He put on the headphones and pressed play. Instantly, his face lit up with joy. I thought I wouldn't be able to listen to music anymore. "Thank you so much. Now I have to win another karaoke competition when I get discharged," my father-in-law said with a smile. I felt a bit relieved. Despite the unfamiliar hospital environment and tough daily treatments, he never complained. In fact, he seemed more worried about me. "Sorry for causing you trouble and expenses. I wish we had traveled more with you and Joseph. I've always wanted to go to that place," he said, showing me a picture on his phone. It was a field full of lavender flowers. "Wow, that's beautiful," I exclaimed. This place used to be just a field, but now it's turned into such a beautiful spot because of urban development. "Lavender is my favorite flower." My father-in-law's eyes sparkled. I wished for his recovery even more urgently. From then on, I decided to stop by a florist before going to the hospital for my father-in-law, who loved flowers. After you left, I felt lonely, but having flowers around changes things. I found myself talking to the flowers, and the nurses looked at me like I was strange. We shared a good laugh over this. 2 weeks later, a feeding tube was attached to my father-in-law, who had been eating normally until then. His body was visibly turning more yellow, and his voice calling my name lost its energy. I had to suppress my fear and act strong, which was tough. I hadn't expected him to become bedridden in just 2 weeks after the cancer diagnosis. The disease's severity weighed heavily on me. I wanted to say, "Stay strong, Dad," but I knew he would be the most frustrated. He probably didn't want to admit that he was weak and would blame his body for not cooperating. His occasional smile showing strength was a relief for me. I often excused myself to the restroom, unable to hold back my tears. After washing my face with cold water to calm down, I returned to his room. Joseph also spent quality time with his father during breaks or days off. I found solace in alone time at a cafe in the hospital. Father-in-law seemed happier when talking with his son, so I made sure they had plenty of time together. An hour later, when I returned to the room, they were discussing insurance money. "I want my modest insurance money to go to Charlotte, who's taking great care of me," father-in-law said, turning towards me. He had changed the beneficiary to ensure that I would receive the money if something happened to him. Then the door flung open with a bang, and my sister-in-law stormed in, hurling abuse. "I heard your conversation. Why did you change the beneficiary to her? It used to be me. Change it back immediately or I'll spread the word that you're the worst father ever." Her words stunned both Joseph and me. Surprisingly, father-in-law defended her. "Okay, I understand. If you feel strongly about it, I'll change the beneficiary back to you. But promise me you'll stop saying hurtful things to Charlotte. She's Joseph's beloved wife, and I won't allow her to be hurt, no matter what," he said sternly. It seemed my sister-in-law's obsession with money was intense. Once father-in-law said that, she nodded quietly and left the room. I wanted to follow her out of disbelief, but my husband and father-in-law stopped me, so I reluctantly sat down. However, something about their behavior seemed off, leaving me with a big question mark in my mind. "Hey, why are you guys laughing?" I asked, puzzled by their amusement. My father-in-law began to explain between chuckles. "That silly girl really believed all my assets were tied up in insurance and went home." "Your plan worked well, Dad," he said, handing me 3 bank cards from a locked drawer. He revealed that they held a fortune beyond my wildest imagination, leaving me speechless with surprise. "I knew you were wealthy, father-in-law, but why were you only enrolled in a single minimal insurance plan?" I wondered aloud. However, he'd assured me that the insurance plan was decent, promising $10 million in case of his death. "All my assets are on these cards. I know I don't have much time left, so I want you to use it. I'm sorry for all the expenses I put you through with my hospital bills, flowers, and clothes," he explained sincerely. No, the money we spent isn't a big deal at all. We can't accept such a huge sum. It would feel like a punishment," I protested. "Just take it as a token of gratitude for taking care of me, and remember, keep this a secret from her," my father-in-law insisted. It seemed that, like us, he didn't think highly of my sister-in-law due to her selfish behavior and lack of consideration for family. That's why we had decided to leave her only the bare minimum, if anything, if something happened to him. "Won't you accept my offer?" Faced with their earnest gazes, I found it hard to refuse. I felt guilty but agreed nonetheless. 2 weeks later, following my father-in-law's wish to spend his remaining time in a more home-like environment receiving palliative care, we moved into a hospice. We reached out to my sister-in-law just in case, but her only response was, "Good for you." It was truly an eye-rolling moment. Despite her absence, the warm conversation between the 3 of us continued. "I'm sorry for causing you trouble with my secret, but there's one more thing. Did you know my father was Martino Aaron?" My father-in-law revealed. "What do you mean, the famous singer? I've seen him on the hit nostalgia song show." "Are you serious?" "That's news to me," I exclaimed. This was big news. Even Joseph didn't know. Apparently, it was not public knowledge that my father-in-law was Martino Aaron's son. He was a secret child, and because Martino Aaron was a public figure, it was kept under wraps. However, Martino Aaron apparently doted on my father-in-law behind the scenes and shared his wealth with him before he passed away. "When I'm gone, go here," my father-in-law said, handing us a piece of paper with an address written on it. He kept evading our questions for more details. A month later, after living his final days at the hospice, my father-in-law peacefully passed away. "Father-in-law," I sobbed, calling for him one more time, but there was no answer. Gratitude welled up in me for how he had always treated me like his own daughter, and tears streamed down my face as we stood by his side, leaning on Joseph for support. At the funeral, my sister-in-law arrived and began crying loudly, a stark contrast to her previous attitude. She talked to the attendees as if she deeply cared for her father. I wanted to expose her true intentions of only caring about money, but I knew it wouldn't make my father-in-law happy. Instead, I decided to think of her as a stranger, which eased my mind somewhat. After the funeral, she didn't bother us, and we didn't bother with her either. A week after my father-in-law's passing, Joseph and I went to the location written on the piece of paper he had given us. We were astonished by what we found. "What is this?" we both exclaimed as we stood before an enormous, opulent mansion, unlike anything we had ever seen before. Unsure of what to do, we decided to explore the vast gardens first. Suddenly, a woman emerged from the house, startling me so much that I fell backward. "I'm sorry, I didn't think anyone was here," she said with a kind smile as she invited us inside. The interior was extravagant, with marble, diamonds, and ornate decorations. It felt like we had stepped into a dream. The woman guided us to a room with plush chairs where we sat down. As I tried to process the reality of the situation, she began to speak slowly. "I've been the caretaker of this house. Your father owned it and used it to entertain his friends from time to time. Every time someone would visit, I would come to assist. But now, there's no longer a need for me to be here. Your father's final wish was to hand over the ownership of this house to you, Joseph and Charlotte. After saying this, she handed us a set of keys, a map of the house, and a notebook detailing the location of various valuables. I'm glad to have met the people your father treasured the most. I wish you happiness, she said before leaving. After 2 hours of exploring, we found a letter from my father-in-law in a desk drawer in the study. It stated that we could live in or sell the house as we wished. We couldn't express our gratitude to him enough for leaving us not only a fortune, but also this grand mansion. With him no longer with us, all we could do was continue living in this world for his sake. The following month, we decided to visit a hotel that my father-in-law had wanted to go to for 15 years. On the way there, we played his favorite music and talked to a photo of him. Father-in-law, we're finally going on a trip together. Let's have a blast today, I said suddenly, and a leaf fell and stuck to our car window, shaking lightly. It felt like father-in-law had answered us, which made me happy. 3 hours later, we arrived at the historic hotel he had spoken of, nestled in a quiet spot surrounded by peaceful nature. Photos of several past presidents adorned the walls, adding to its recognition and importance. After we were shown to our spacious room, we sat down on the sofa, enjoying the welcome drinks and fresh fruits. It's been a while since we've been able to enjoy a leisurely trip like this, Joseph remarked. Yeah, well, Dad's with us today, I replied. It had been a while since Joseph and I shared a meaningful glance, and I couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed. After indulging in the spa and exploring the hotel, it was finally time for the meal we had eagerly awaited since we had ordered for 3. The room service staff, upon delivering our meal, was quite surprised when we explained the situation. They nodded in understanding with a kind smile. After reminiscing about my father-in-law for a while, they even offered us a complimentary bottle of wine. This is delicious, just like Dad would say, I exclaimed. I wasn't used to drinking much, so I got a bit tipsy that day, and my memory became a bit hazy. However, Joseph, who had a higher tolerance for alcohol, remembered my actions and recounted them to me the next morning. Last night, you kept caressing Dad's picture and saying, I love you. You've said that to me only a few times. I felt a bit jealous of Dad, he said, laughing. As we drove along a different route than the day before, we shared this humorous anecdote. Then suddenly, we spotted it. Lavender blooming as far as the eye could see. There was no mistaking it. This was the place my father-in-law had shown us in the photo. Embraced by the gentle beauty of the lavender, I felt invigorated, no longer trapped in sadness, but eager to face forward. Dad told me once that Mom used to gaze at the lavender a lot before she passed away, Joseph shared. Realizing that my father-in-law had brought us here out of love for his wife touched my heart deeply. Since then, we've started bringing lavender to the grave. It has become a precious flower for our family, warming our hearts and spirits. Once we return to our normal lives, we begin spending our weekends in the luxurious house my father-in-law left us. Thanks to this, every week felt like a vacation. My love for Joseph deepened and my gratitude to my father-in-law overflowed. I can't count how many times tears of joy soaked my clothes. Fast forward a month later, it was a weekday around 7 p.m. After Joseph came home and took a bath, I was preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. When I checked the monitor, I saw my sister-in-law. She rarely comes to our house. I wanted to pretend we weren't home, but with Joseph's car in the driveway and the lights on, that wasn't possible. As I hesitated, my impatient sister-in-law began pounding on the door. Worried about the neighbors noticing, I quickly turned off the stove and hurried to the door. As soon as I opened it, she started yelling before the door fully closed. Where the hell are you two? On the weekend. It seemed she had come to our house over the weekend, but Joseph and I weren't there. I couldn't tell her why, so I remained silent as she glared at me threateningly. All right, come this way, I said, leading her to the living room. I didn't want her lingering at the front door, so I intended to let Joseph handle her. Just then, Joseph, fresh from his bath, appeared at the entrance, and I sighed in relief. What brings you here around dinner time? Joseph asked straightforwardly. As I watched them, he led her to the living room, and the conversation continued. I came to light incense for Dad at the family altar over the weekend, but you two were nowhere to be found, she said self-righteously. Her tone still irked me. Then, out of the blue, Joseph dropped the bombshell. I actually spent my weekend dating Charlotte, trying to pass on all the love that Dad gave me. Sorry if this doesn't sit well with you. A sister who has to deal with her husband being lovey-dovey with another woman, Joseph said. My voice and sister-in-law's overlapped in shock. What? She exclaimed. Sister-in-law was visibly shaken by this unexpected revelation. There's no way. What are you talking about? There's no way he could be interested in any other woman but me, sister-in-law protested. Immediately after, Joseph took out his mobile phone from his pocket and showed a picture to sister-in-law. Curiosity piqued. I peeked at the photo, and sure enough, it was sister-in-law's husband arm in arm with another woman. Sister-in-law's fury and sadness reached the peak, and she seemed to stop caring about me and Joseph. As soon as she got the picture forwarded from Joseph, she stormed off. The next day and the day after, when I asked Joseph, who didn't talk about sister-in-law, what happened to the couple, he said he didn't know because he had blocked sister-in-law's contact. I don't consider her a sibling anymore. All I want is to live a peaceful daily life with you, Joseph said. Fast forward a month later, while out shopping with Joseph as usual, we bumped into a neighbor from where sister-in-law lived. Apparently, the sister-in-law couple was in the midst of divorce discussions, with the husband completely out of love with sister-in-law and a reluctant sister-in-law still not wanting to split despite the infidelity. As much as it sounds like a tough situation, I've decided to stop worrying about sister-in-law and just focus on living my own life. As long as I have Joseph, I have nothing to fear. Father-in-law always used to say the key to happiness is to laugh a lot and think out loud. I'm going to go back to my old job soon, but I plan on adhering to father-in-law's advice and enjoying life to the fullest, even for father-in-law's sake. Joseph and I both love to sing, and we've promised to participate in a karaoke competition together. Our goal: to make it to the same podium that father-in-law did, to reach the top as we let our singing voices resonate towards the heavens. My mother-in-law told me something surprising. She said, "We're going to live together now. We turned the house into 2 separate homes to make it easier. Is the house in your name, Emma? Sorry to ask, but can you pay the $80,000 bill for the changes?" My mother-in-law and husband thought it was funny, but I felt determined. I was going to tell them something important, even though my husband didn't know yet. I had proof too. My name is Emma Davis, and I'm 26 years old. I live a little away from the city in a place surrounded by nature. I work in an office and draw pictures for fun. Recently, I've been sharing my drawings online and reading the comments people leave. My husband, who is 3 years older than me, and I have been happily married and living in our beloved old farmhouse since we got married. But there's been a visitor who comes by once a month since then, and they always give me a headache. Emma, I'm here. Please open up quickly." I hurried to the front door when I heard the insistent banging. It's my mother-in-law. "I'll open it right away," I said, even though there's a doorbell right next to the door. I tried to smile as I opened the sliding door. There are so many bugs around here. It's so annoying. Is George still at work? Poor thing, even on Saturday. Oh, I brought some of his favorite food. I saw a tired-looking woman holding a big bag waiting at the door. As she chattered on, I tried to keep up my fake smile. This visitor, who comes once a month, is none other than my husband's mother, my mother-in-law. Since my husband is an only child, she feels it's her duty to look after him even after we got married. She even gives me tips on how to manage the house. Last time she visited, she rearranged the whole fridge, making it a hassle for me to prepare breakfast the next day. I remember my husband telling me before we got married, if my parents ever need care, we'll live together. I hope you understand. I'm disappointed at the thought of leaving our lovely old house when the time comes, but I've accepted it. What bothers me more is the idea of living with my mother-in-law all the time. I feel sorry for my husband, as it's not something I'm looking forward to. Fast forward 2 years into our married life in the farmhouse. My husband told me that his father slipped on the stairs at home and broke his leg. They'll need our help from now on. Let's live together, just like we talked about before we got married. Yes, I'm worried too. So I think it's a good idea. Can I still do my drawings? I was concerned about my father-in-law's health, so I agreed to move in with them without hesitation. But I was worried that taking care of my in-laws and doing housework might leave me with no time for my drawing hobby. Whether he knew about my worries or not, my husband just said, "I want you to focus on the house," and left for his office. Left alone in my room, I felt like I was giving up on my husband. As I looked through my drawings, I started sorting out my feelings. Just when I had decided to live with them, something unexpected happened. While I was at work, I suddenly felt numbness in my hands and feet and got really dizzy. I collapsed. Thankfully, a colleague called an ambulance, and although I wasn't in danger, it turned out I had had a stroke at a young age after a medical checkup. Even though I had been warned about high blood pressure during health checkups before, I regretted not taking it seriously and going to the hospital. From the time I found out about the illness to being hospitalized, including tests, surgery, and recovery, it took about 2 months. It all happened so quickly, and I realized my husband showed very little concern for me. After being diagnosed with a stroke at a young age, I called my husband with trembling hands. But all I heard was disappointment in his voice, saying, "So living together will have to wait, huh?" I couldn't believe he was more worried about living arrangements than my health. Luckily, my father-in-law was still in the hospital with a fracture, so I didn't have to worry about taking care of him. This allowed me to focus on my treatment, which was a silver lining. Plus, since we didn't have kids, that wasn't an added concern. Suddenly, I thought of my mother-in-law, always talking about wanting to see her grandchild soon. But I pushed that thought away and grabbed my sketchbook. Lately, I had been too busy with preparations to live with my in-laws and undergoing tests since my stroke to indulge in my favorite pastime of drawing. I knew once I moved in with them, I'd have even less time for it. I decided to view my time in the hospital as a gift of freedom from God and resolved to enjoy my hobby to the fullest. Once this period was over, I promised myself to give my best to my husband and in-laws, whether it was doing chores or anything else. The 2-month hospital stay flew by, and finally it was time to leave. My husband casually asked if he should pick me up, but I wanted some time alone, so I declined, feeling a bit guilty. As I rode the bus, I looked out the window and saw the familiar scenery. I realized I was already near home. The sunlight shining on the lush green leaves was breathtaking, and I felt a mix of emotions, thinking goodbye to this beautiful natural setting. Since my in-laws' house is closer to the city, my life is going to change a lot from now on. Feeling a bit sad, I stepped off the bus at the familiar stop. As I walked towards what was supposed to be my beloved old home, I suddenly froze in astonishment. Instead of the familiar private house I knew so well, there stood a completely unfamiliar house that I had never seen before. After being in the hospital for about 2 months, I double-checked the surrounding buildings and the path I took, wondering if I had somehow gotten a location wrong. But it was no mistake. There was no point in wandering around, so I timidly pressed the intercom of the unfamiliar house. A voice I knew well, undoubtedly my husband's, responded with a simple yes. Still feeling confused, I quietly said, "It's Michelle," into the intercom. The front door creaked open and my husband, dressed casually, appeared. "Ah, welcome home. You're back earlier than I expected. I had the day off today. I could have picked you up," George said. "George, what happened to our house? Why has it changed so much?" I interrupted him, feeling disbelief, noticing his relaxed demeanor, perhaps indicating he had just woken up with his messy hair. Ignoring my anxiousness, George only responded vaguely, "Huh. What's going on? What happened?" without addressing my question. Just then, laughter echoed from inside the house. Unable to believe it, I pushed past my husband and made my way to the living room. Opening the unfamiliar door leading to the living room, I saw my mother-in-law lying on a couch, watching TV. She was laughing heartily, holding her stomach. "Why is my mother-in-law in this house?" I asked, bewildered. "Michelle, welcome back. Hospital stays can be long, but don't worry. I took care of the house while you were gone," my mother-in-law said casually. I was puzzled by what my mother-in-law meant by taking care of the house. Did she mean chores? With a sinking feeling, I pressed her on why our old house had changed so much. Without any hint of remorse, she replied, "Well, since we're all going to live together, I thought it would be more comfortable to remodel it into a duplex." The words "remodeled it into a duplex" kept echoing in my head. My mother-in-law had always been one to meddle in our lives. But I never imagined she would renovate our house without asking. And weren't we supposed to move into my in-laws' house, closer to the city center? Every time she visited our old house, she complained about the bugs and the walk from the station. So why all the changes now? Oh, and if something else important I have to tell you, my mother-in-law said, switching off the TV with a grin. The remodeling cost a bit. I believe the title to this house is under your name, Michelle. I'm sorry, but could you handle the payment? My mother-in-law chuckled, devoid of any hint of apology. Ah, it's $80,000, she said, her smile growing wider. That's the cost of remodeling, and the title to this house comes with it, Michelle. $80,000. Her unexpected words hit me like a punch to the head, and my legs started shaking. I couldn't even find the words to respond. As I stared at my mother-in-law, stunned and laughing without a care, my husband appeared at the entrance and slipped into the living room. Seeing him, I instinctively moved towards him, holding on to a faint hope that he would support me. I repeated to my husband exactly what my mother-in-law had said, desperately awaiting his reaction, but all I got from him was a cold reply. Well, that sounds about right. You'll handle it, won't you? That's just who he is. When I had a stroke, he cared more about our living arrangements than my health. He's the kind of man who listens to his mother's every word, no matter how absurd. A man who always believes his mother is right. My discomfort and dissatisfaction towards my husband reached a boiling point. Once it overflowed, I was done. With all my heart, I decided I would leave this family behind. I understand now, George. I'm going to divorce you and your mother, Cecilia. And no, Cecilia, you can handle the renovation costs on your own. I declared this all at once and turned my back on them, intending to leave the room quickly, but they weren't going to let me go so easily. I've been losing interest in you anyway, so it's no big deal. But remember, this house is in your name, Emma, so you have a responsibility to pay, George remarked. That's right, feel free to leave, but please settle your dues first, added Cecilia. I was astonished by their selfishness. I couldn't help but sigh. I was sure if I turned around, I'd see their smug faces grinning in victory, but I refused to look back. I stood tall and replied, You keep saying the house is in my name, George, but did you forget that ownership has been transferred to you? I revealed the truth, but they only laughed, thinking I was lying to avoid paying. That's when I brought up how George had asked me to change the property's ownership when we got married, as he didn't want the house to be in his wife's name for appearance's sake. Since I didn't particularly care about the property title, I had immediately transferred it to his name. Upon hearing this, their laughter abruptly stopped, and I could feel their panic gradually setting in. I don't recall saying such a thing. There's no proof anyway, George retorted. Anticipating this response, I turned back to face them, walked past them, and opened a drawer in a shelf from our old house. Let's see, it should be somewhere around. Ah, here it is. This is the proof, I said, taking out a document that listed the property and house ownership and showed it to them. When I pointed to the part that showed the ownership was in George's name, his face went pale. That's fraud. I never thought you'd actually do it, and I definitely can't pay such a huge sum of $80,000. George exclaimed. I was disgusted by my husband's reaction. He started yelling as soon as he realized the payment obligation was on him. Since a decent conversation seems impossible, let's communicate through lawyers from now on. Cecilia, your son seems to be in quite a pickle, so please take good care of him from now on, I stated calmly beside my loud husband. I smiled at my mother-in-law, who stood dazed, and finally turned my back on them, leaving their home for good. After that, my husband called several times, but I chose to ignore him entirely, opting instead to communicate formally through a lawyer, given our strained relationship and the issues with my mother-in-law. The divorce was settled without any problems. Regarding my husband's accusation that changing the property's ownership was fraud, it was determined that it was a mutual decision made when we got married 2 years ago. My lawyer reassured me with a smile that this was neither fraud nor anything illegal. With that, all the uncertainty inside me disappeared completely. It turned out that I was supposed to foot the bill for renovating the house as soon as I got discharged from a hospital. I couldn't help but appreciate the well-executed, spiteful move of pushing me into a difficult situation just after I had undergone surgery and rehabilitation and finally got discharged due to illness. In the end, since the house was in my husband's name, it was his responsibility to pay the hefty renovation costs, and he ended up cornering himself. Moreover, I was able to secure alimony after the divorce was finalized. My husband, faced with a claim for an amount he couldn't possibly pay off, either borrowed money from risky sources or didn't pay at all. While I was in the midst of the legal battle with my husband and mother-in-law, I received an apology from my father-in-law, Bob, who had been hospitalized with a broken leg, saying, "I'm sorry for my wife and son's behavior." Of course, it didn't seem that Bob was directly involved in this matter, but it couldn't be denied that for 2 years after our marriage, he had turned a blind eye to his wife and my indifferent husband. After briefly replying to Bob's message, I made the decision to cut all ties with my old family and start afresh. Since then, my health has been gradually improving and I was able to return to work. When I was married, I used to draw illustrations, but I always felt restricted by my husband's presence. Now, I can immerse myself in drawing whenever and however I want. Initially, drawing was just a hobby, but now I receive job offers through the social networking site where I post my illustrations. I spend more time drawing for work than for pleasure these days. My current dream is to buy an old farmhouse in a somewhat rural town using the alimony from my husband and my savings, and to open an art studio there. Today, I'm taking the first step towards realizing that dream by heading to see an old farmhouse. As I gaze out at the scenery from the bus, I can't help but think back to the day I left the hospital, the day that changed my life forever. The natural scenery outside remains the same as it was that day, but my feelings are clearer now, and I'm filled with excitement for the new life that awaits me. The leaves on the trees, illuminated by the sunlight, look so bright and dazzling.
Once a woman marries, she's no longer part of the family. Family celebrations are only for family, so leave already. My sister, Amy, said this to me with a sneer, while my mother stood by, telling me to hurry up and go. I had returned to celebrate Amy's coming-of-age ceremony, hoping for some warmth, but my family treated me as an outsider. At that moment, it became painfully clear I was no longer one of them. My chest tightened, but I quickly composed myself. If that's how they feel, there's only one thing I can do: make them regret their words. My name is Sherry, I'm 22 years old, and I've grown accustomed to living on my own. It's been 4 years since I left home after graduating from vocational high school. Life hasn't been easy. I've worked hard to make ends meet. It's not luxurious, but it's the life I chose, and I take pride in supporting myself. Yet, even now, memories from the past linger like shadows. My mother and Amy's actions still weigh on me. The day before my first birthday, my father left us for another woman. My mother never forgave him. Unfortunately, I inherited his features, and because of that, my mother harbored a deep resentment toward me. "You're just like him. Seeing your face makes me sick." As a child, I didn't fully understand her words, but I felt the cold stares, the disdain. To her, I was nothing more than a living reminder of her pain. In the beginning, my grandparents showed me some care, but as my mother leaned on them more and more for financial support, even they began to pull away. By the time I turned 2, my mother had remarried. Soon after, Amy was born, and my mother's new family unit was complete. Without me, I was an outsider. One day, I watched my mother, stepfather, and Amy pack their suitcases. "Where are you going?" I asked. "On vacation," my mother replied curtly. "Can I come too?" "Of course not. We'll drop you off at daycare." Their laughter echoed as they left without me. I was always left behind, sent to a 24-hour daycare while they went on family trips. Each time, I'd watch them leave with smiles on their faces, my heart sinking deeper into loneliness. At home, my mother's rejection became impossible to ignore. I was isolated, invisible to my so-called family. Once, Amy innocently asked my mother, "Why doesn't Sherry get a birthday party?" For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe my mother cared, after all. "Celebrate her birthday?" My mother scoffed. "There's nothing to celebrate." Her words cut me to the core. From that day on, Amy's attitude shifted. She began to look down on me, mimicking our mother's disdain. During family celebrations, I was always sidelined. Amy had birthday cakes and parties, while I had nothing, not even a candle to blow out. When I entered high school, I faced yet another blow. My family refused to pay for my education. Attending vocational school and working to support myself felt like an escape. Being outside, earning my keep, was far better than staying in that house. but no matter how hard I tried, home was still the only place I had to return to. My mother never acknowledged my efforts. At 18, I made the hardest decision of my life. I left. I couldn't take it anymore. I craved freedom, a life where I wouldn't feel suffocated sharing space with my mother, stepfather, and Amy. When I finally left, they didn't show a shred of emotion. "Do whatever you want, you're not our problem anymore," my mother said coldly. Those words severed the last fragile bond one had with them. Life on my own wasn't easy. I worked tirelessly to survive, but for the first time, I felt free to live for myself. Yet, even now, at 22, I can't entirely escape their shadow. Memories of my mother and Amy linger, especially with Amy's coming-of-age ceremony approaching. My own ceremony had been non-existent, but I knew Amy's would be lavish, as everything always was for her. One day, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Hearing her voice for the first time in years made my chest tighten. "Amy's 21st birthday is next week. You're not coming, right?" she said bluntly. I was stunned. Why would she even think to call me? I wasn't invited. I managed to reply. "Good. It'd be awkward if you showed up," she said, her words cutting through me like a knife. After the call ended, a weight settled over me. I whispered to myself, of course I wouldn't go, but the suffocating ache in my chest didn't go away. I thought I had moved on, that I'd severed all ties with them, but why did they still have this hold over me? I told myself I wouldn't let them control me anymore, but the past is a stubborn thing, it refuses to let go. Yet, amidst the pain, I felt a faint desire to confront it, to confront them. Especially Amy. Despite everything, I wanted to celebrate her milestone, so I bought a cake and a gift and decided to visit my family for the first time in years. Standing in front of the familiar door, my heart pounded. It had been so long, and I was terrified of what awaited me. When I rang the doorbell, Amy answered. Her voice was sharp and mocking. "Who's there?" "Amy, it's me," I said cautiously. "Stop joking. I brought a cake. Please, open the door." After a moment of silence, the door swung open. Without a word, Amy snatched the cake box from my hands and, to my shock, threw it back at me. The box hit the ground, the cake splattering across the floor. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I can't eat food from a stranger," she sneered. Stranger. The word struck me harder than I expected. Deep down, I had hoped that despite everything, she still saw me as her sister, but hearing her call me a stranger made something inside me break. As I stood frozen, my mother appeared, laughing alongside Amy. "What were you thinking, coming here?" she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "Did you come to ruin things?" Her words stung, and I felt a wave of regret wash over me. "Why is she even here?" My stepfather's voice called out from the living room. "She's not family anymore." My voice trembled as I asked, "Am I not family?" "Why?" My mother scoffed. "Of course you're not family. We're not even related." Amy laughed, her voice cruel. "Did you really think you were one of us?" Their words crushed me. I had always known I didn't belong, but hearing it said so plainly tore me apart. "Clean up that mess before you leave," my mother barked, gesturing to the ruined cake. Numbly, I obeyed. As I cleaned, Amy and my mother laughed mockingly behind me. "She brought the cake and now she's cleaning it up herself," Amy said, pathetic. Their laughter echoed in my ears, but I focused on finishing as quickly as possible. When I was done, I turned silently to leave. "Leaving already? Should have never come, huh?" Amy taunted. I didn't respond. As I stepped out the door, Amy called out one last time. "Don't come back, stranger." Her words echoed in my mind as the door slammed shut behind me, sealing the final chapter of our relationship. I realized I had been clinging to a false hope that something might change, that somehow, they might see me differently, but I was wrong. I was nothing more than a stranger to them, and maybe I always had been. It was time to stop wasting my energy trying to find a place in their lives. I already had a place where I truly belonged. That place was with my husband, Don. I met Don through a mutual friend, and from the moment he came into my life, everything changed. I had never thought I would get married. I didn't believe I deserved a family of my own, but Don saw me for who I was, accepted me completely, and never judged my complicated family history. When I shared my painful memories with him, he simply listened. "You didn't get to choose your family," he said gently, "but none of that is your fault. The family we create together will be your true home." His words warmed my heart, and for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. With Don, I learned what happiness was. Our life together became my anchor, irreplaceable and full of love. but I had never told my family about him. I didn't want to invite their negativity into our lives. Still, news of my marriage somehow reached them. 3 days after the incident with the cake, my mother called unexpectedly. "I heard you got married. Why didn't you tell us something so important?" Her tone was accusatory, but I remained calm. "I didn't think it was necessary to tell you," I replied. There was a long silence on the other end. "Fine, do whatever you want," she said at last. "You'll end up alone anyway." This time, her words didn't hurt me. I had expected them. Instead, I felt reassured, knowing how happy I was with my new life. I wasn't alone, I had Dawn, and together we were building a family rooted in love and mutual respect. Her bitter remark was meaningless. It couldn't change my happiness. That phone call marked the final break between us. Or so I thought. 3 days later, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, I was stunned to see Amy standing there. How had she found my address? Still, I invited her in. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my guard immediately up. "I just wanted to see what kind of guy you married," she said with a playful tone that put me on edge. As soon as she entered the living room, her eyes locked on Dawn. "This is your husband? Not bad at all. How did someone like you snag him?" I clenched my fists, anger simmering, but I stayed silent. Dawn, however, remained composed. "I'm Sherry's husband. Please stop with the unnecessary remarks," he said calmly. Amy looked surprised by his directness, but quickly recovered. She stepped closer to Dawn, her smile turning sickly sweet. "Don't be so stiff. Let's have some fun. Sherry won't mind, will she?" I was shocked by her audacity, but Dawn didn't waver. "I'm not interested. My happiness is with my wife," he said firmly. "Please stop this behavior." A wave of gratitude washed over me for Dawn's unwavering loyalty. Amy shrugged, her smile fading into a cold smirk. "Whatever. I don't care about your happiness anyway," she said with a dismissive tone. Her feigned indifference made my next steps clear. "You don't need people like her in your life, Sherry," Dawn said softly after she left. "For your sake, and ours, it's best to cut ties." His words mirrored my own thoughts. Amy and the rest of my family had no place in the life I was building anymore. It was time to let go. That visit was a turning point. For years, I had been sending money to my family. I had paid for Amy's tuition and even helped with the mortgage on their home, all in the hope that they might someday accept me as part of the family. But after Amy's visit, I realized I owed them nothing. They had taken all I had to give and returned only scorn. Now, I chose to give my energy, my love, and my support to the family I was creating with Dawn, a family built on kindness, respect, and unconditional love. It was time to stop looking back and start living fully in the present. I decided it was time to stop the financial support. When I told Dawn, he gave me a warm smile and nodded. "That's the right choice, Sherry. You've done more than enough. Now it's time to focus on yourself." His words lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Cutting off the money felt like reclaiming my freedom. I filed the necessary paperwork and halted the payments. For the first time, I felt a deep sense of relief. But peace didn't last long. A month later, my routine was shattered by loud, angry banging on the door. When I opened it, my mother and Amy stood there, their faces twisted in fury. "Why didn't the tuition payment go through? The landlord is threatening eviction," my mother spat, her tone accusatory. Their outrage didn't surprise me. I had been expecting this confrontation. Taking a deep breath, I responded calmly. "I stopped the payments because I'm no longer responsible for you." Their expressions shifted from anger to shock. "What do you mean you stopped the payments?" Amy demanded. "I even sold the house to recover what I already paid," I added, my voice steady. "What?" My mother's voice rose. "You sold the house? How could you?" "You made it clear I'm not part of your family," I said, meeting their glares head-on, "so I have no obligation to support you." "But what about my tuition?" Amy cried. "I can't finish school without it." "That's your responsibility now, not mine," I replied firmly. "I won't fund a family that doesn't include me." "You can't do this. After everything I've done for you," my mother began. "Done for me?" I interrupted, my voice rising for the first time. "You mean the years of neglect and cruelty? I owe you nothing. My decision is final." They tried to argue, their anger quickly turning to desperation, but I stood firm. "You'll regret this," Amy yelled as they left. "You're the worst sister ever." But their words no longer held any power over me. For the first time, I felt truly free from their grasp. A week later, their harassment escalated. They showed up outside my home daily, shouting and causing scenes. They even contacted Dawn's parents in an attempt to shame me. While my in-laws were understanding, they grew concerned. "They've crossed the line," Don said one evening. "You need to take action before it gets worse." At first, I hesitated, but I knew he was right. I gathered evidence from our security cameras and filed a police report. Initially, the authorities treated it as a family dispute and were slow to act, but I persisted. Finally, after another disruptive incident, the police intervened. My mother and Amy were warned to stay away, but they ignored the warnings. Their behavior escalated until the police had no choice but to issue formal restraining orders. Even my neighbors, fed up with the constant commotion, supported my case. Some suggested I move to escape the chaos. Don agreed. "Let's start fresh somewhere new," he said. I couldn't have agreed more. Quietly, we found a new home and relocated. Even after the move, my mother and Amy tried to track us down. They even showed up at Don's parents' house, but my father-in-law firmly shut them down. "Sherry is part of our family now," he said. "If you have issues, they're your responsibility, not hers." Amy tried pleading with my mother-in-law for help, but she was equally resolute. "You made your bed, now lie in it." Eventually, their efforts failed, and they stopped trying. For the first time in years, I felt free. The harassment had drained me emotionally, but once it ended, life became peaceful again. Don and I settled into our new home and focused on building a future together. My in-laws treated me like their own daughter, offering me the warmth and acceptance I had always longed for. "Sherry, your family," they told me one evening, "whatever happens, we'll always be here for you." Their words gave me a sense of security I had never known. Meanwhile, my mother and stepfather's fragile relationship fell apart without my financial support. Eventually, they divorced, and my mother lived a quiet, isolated life. Amy, too, faced the consequences of her actions. A potential marriage fell through when her fiancé learned about her family background and past behavior. Left to fend for herself, Amy struggled to rebuild her life. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to pity them. Their actions had led them to this place. In contrast, my life with Don flourished. We grew closer with each shared experience, facing challenges and celebrating successes together. "We've been through so much, but look at where we are now," Don said one evening as we relaxed in our cozy living room. He took my hand and looked into my eyes. "Let's focus on our future. I want to make you as happy as you make me." His sincerity brought tears to my eyes. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere, with someone who truly cared for me. The shadows of my past no longer loomed over me. Don and his family became the family I had always longed for. Their love and support healed wounds I once thought would never mend. "Family isn't just about blood," Don's father had once told me. "It's about the bonds you choose to nurture." Those words stayed with me. Looking back, I saw my struggles with my mother and Amy as a painful but necessary part of my journey. They had taught me resilience and the value of true family. As Don and I moved forward, I knew I had finally found my home, a place filled with love, stability, and a future worth cherishing.
I'm Lisa, and stepping into that party was the last place I thought my world would turn. There I stood beside Rachel, anticipating some laughter and free drinks. It all changed with a glance from James, his easy smile and hands casually tucked into his jeans. "Who's that?" I nudged Rachel, eyeing him. "That's James," she half shouted over the music. "Went to college with him. Real chill guy. You want to meet him?" "Sure," I shrugged. New faces meant new stories, but I wasn't prepared for the instant connection. James had a way of talking as if I were the only person in the room, and those green eyes didn't hurt either. "So, you like the Rolling Stones?" He caught me eyeing his t-shirt. Vintage band tees were everywhere, but I meant it when I said only someone who really digs good music would wear Mick Jagger on their chest. He laughed. "Are you calling me out or complimenting me?" "Guess you'll never know," I teased back. By the end of the night, we were inseparable, discussing everything from our love for old-school rock to names for our future pets. James got my number and didn't wait 3 days to call. The next morning, we were deep in the what of tomorrow, talking about rings and forever. But forever comes with its own baggage. Meeting the parents was on the horizon, and the icy reception at the dinner table was unexpected. Margaret, James's mom, broke the so-called ice with a sharp question about my job at the hospital. It wasn't polite interest, but a harder appraisal. "Yeah, the county hospital up north," I replied confidently. "How much do they pay for that?" Her eyes were sharp, her tone sharper. James shot me a look, but I decided to be upfront. "Well, James does more than get by," she said, interrupting. "So, about this marriage." It was a punch to the gut. I didn't care about money, but the financial discussion had begun. His dad chimed in, and the tone for our commitment was set, tough, not all sunshine and romance. But it was real, and real was something I could work with. Our wedding was simple, fitting in a matchbox. No fanfare, just him, me, and a couple of signatures. In the beginning, we were a team, tackling life from our small joint command center, his old house. We set up a system, half on everything, shared chores, and even cooking together. There was comfort in the routine, in knowing what to expect when we got home. But reality is a tough customer. 4 months down the line, the teamwork was taking hits. Excuses rolled in, bad days stringing together like a lousy pearl necklace. What was meant to be equal started to weigh heavy on my side. The shared life felt more like a solo gig. 2 weeks of slugging it out on my own, and I finally snapped. I wasn't one to make a fuss, but living like this was unbearable. I confronted James, who walked in with headphones on, oblivious to the mounting tension. "James," I blurted out, unable to hide the annoyance in my tone. "What happened to sharing the load?" He looked at me, genuinely confused or exceptionally skilled at acting. "What are you on about, Lissa?" he asked, pulling off his headphones. "I spent nearly an hour scraping your dried-up yogurt off the coffee table this morning. It's like living with a toddler," I complained. He just shrugged, a nonchalant gesture as if he didn't have a care in the world. "Chill out, will you? It's just a bit of a mess." "A bit of mess?" I called it quits. I stopped picking up his dirty socks, stopped doing his laundry. It was petty, but I was at my breaking point. Of course, that's when Margaret, his mother, decided to pop in unannounced. The perfect storm. "Look at this place," she said, her nose crinkling as if she'd found a rotten egg. I tried to keep cool, offered her tea, but she was on the warpath. "James, this is no way for a man to live," she said sternly, eyes fixed on me. "I didn't raise you to be living in a pigsty." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Margaret, it's a 2-person job, and I've been doing it solo." "I'm not his maid, you're his wife," I retorted. "A wife keeps a clean home?" She snapped back, missing the irony that I too had a full-time job. I felt my face flush with anger. "And what does a husband do, Margaret?" I snapped back. "He's the breadwinner," she hollered back, missing the irony again that I too contributed financially. Margaret stormed out, slamming the door, leaving me and James in the rubble of our domestic battlefield. James, knocked down a notch at work, came home that day, dumped his keys like they were made of lead. "They're cutting back," he said, the words hanging heavy. I'm off the management track. Just like that, he decided he wouldn't help with the bills anymore. Suddenly, it was all on me. I banged pots and pans like they owed me money. "Why are you making such a racket?" he asked, picking at his beer label. "Someone's got to pay for those beers," I snapped, "and keep this place looking half decent." The ensuing conversation was like a round in the ring. "You expect me to chip in after a day like today?" he shot back. "Yeah, James," I said, not backing down. "Because I had a cakewalk of a day, right?" He had no comeback for that. Just took another swig. "We had a deal. We share this, remember?" I said, standing in front of the blaring TV. "A deal doesn't hold when things go south," he said, not even looking at me. I stood in front of the screen. "So, what?" I'm supposed to just smile and nod and keep the house like some 1950s sitcom mom. I glared at him. "You wanted a partnership. Here it is. This is life. Deal with it," he said, thick and toxic words hanging in the air. Ignoring the problem wasn't going to make it vanish. "We're supposed to be in this together. And that means not ditching out when it gets tough, I argued. I didn't ditch out the job, did I? He muttered, barely audible over the TV noise. I turned off the TV. We'll see how long we last, if this is how it's going to be, I said, and silence filled the room, as thick as the dirt I'd been cleaning all day. He looked away. I stormed off to bed that night, no more words, none that mattered anyhow. They were all bitter, spat out with more hurt than real heart, but they stuck with me like thorns in my side. The tension in the house was like walking into a wall of ice. Barely a word was passed between us without a sharp edge. James had taken to eating his meals alone, delivered by Margaret with a thud at our door, the plastic containers hitting the wood like the gavel of a judge passing sentence. So, what are we having tonight? I asked poker-faced as James marched past me, Margaret's cooking in hand. Does it matter? He barely glanced my way. It's not like you're eating. It was true. I didn't have the stomach for food, not for what was in those containers. It was more than lasagna or stew. It was a heavy dose of rejection served up by Margaret, seeping into every room of the house. Then Granny B called, cheerful and active. I could almost smell her lavender perfume through the phone. A visit from Granny could turn a place upside down. And that's what I sorely needed, a gust of fresh air. I'm packing my bags, baby girl, she chuckled. But I heard the steel underneath, a resilience that had gotten her through tougher times than this. I need to see your life. I broached the subject over dinner, a silent affair with the clinking of cutlery replacing conversation. Granny B wants to visit, I said, dropping the bomb without preamble. James paused mid-bite, his eyes hardening. Here, stay with us, I nodded, gripping my fork like a lifeline. He shook his head, speaking with his mouth full, forgetting manners existed. No chance. Margaret wouldn't like it. Since when do we schedule our life around your mother? The boldness of my words surprised even me. Margaret's voice sliced through from the doorway. Since it's our house, girl, you just live here. The unfairness choked me like a noose. Your son and I are supposed to be building a life together, Margaret. She snorted. A life? You called us a life. Look at you two. I bring him food because someone needs to take care of my boy. James stood up, his chair scraping back like a scream. And that's how it's going to be. No visits, no changes. It's settled. I looked between them, the mother and son, feeling the outsider tag slapping against my chest. It's settled because you say so. What about what I want, what I need? You need to understand that things are the way they are. James shot back, red flushing his cheeks. My house, my rules. The ache spread from my heart to my fingertips, but I squared my shoulders. It's also my home, James, or at least it's supposed to be. He had no answer, just the hard line of his jaw, telling me the conversation was over. But nothing was settled. Granny B would come, somehow. I'd make sure of it. For the first time, I wanted the battleground. If they wouldn't budge, neither would I. There was fight in me yet, and the freeze in the house would need my fire to thaw it, whether they liked it or not. For the third month in a row, James did not contribute his share to our family budget. I was carrying everything, the house, the groceries, and even his damn beer. We had a fight, the last straw. James and I stood facing each other, our words sharp enough to slice through steel. The room felt smaller as the tension grew, air thick with resentment saved up from months of silent battles and unspoken words. I don't want you as my wife, James said, his voice dripping with finality, signaling the end of everything. It didn't come out as a shout. That might have been better. A shout I could have responded to with fury. Instead, it was a low hiss, a deflating tire's last breath, leaving behind silence that echoed louder than any scream. I don't want to be where I'm not wanted, I countered with as much steadiness as I could muster, despite the tremor within. He didn't stop me as I started to pack my bags. Each piece of clothing folded felt like a piece of the life we'd built being tucked away, rendered insignificant. I headed to the door, my suitcase a loyal companion trailing behind me. James was still standing in the center of the chaos, the eye of the storm that had hit us over and over until we'd broken into scattered pieces beyond collection. He didn't move, didn't try to stop me. The door closed with a click, much too gentle for the ending it represented. Outside, Granny B was in her old dependable car that smelled of leather and peppermint. Leaning over to open the passenger door, I heaved my suitcase into the back and slid in beside her without a word. "All set, dear?" Granny asked, her eyes soft but her voice strong, a rock in a swirling sea. "Yeah, I'm set," I mumbled, buckling the seatbelt over the hollow feeling in my chest. Granny B didn't start the car right away. "Heck of a fool," she said flatly, adding an expletive that would have made a sailor blush. I choked out a strange chuckle. "Well, it's true." She finally turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life reassuringly. "You're worth 10 of him, 15 even." She backed out, and we started towards the new apartment. I didn't reply. Instead, I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the landscape blur the same way my thoughts were a jumble of memories and pain. Granny B didn't push with questions or platitudes. She just drove, every now and then muttering something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like curses aimed at James. The cozy rented apartment was in a normal neighborhood, a place where you could blend in and lick your wounds in peace. As Granny hauled my bag out of the car with surprising strength, I unlocked the door to the unknown. "Well," Granny said, clapping her hands together, "time to rebuild, kiddo. You've got a life to claim, and that sorry excuse for a man to forget." I nodded, feeling the very first flutter of something like hope in my chest. Breaking points, I realized, weren't just about endings. They were about beginnings too. Messy, painful, but real. First starts didn't erase the past, but they gave you a canvas to create something new, and maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed. Granny B was sitting on my threadbare couch, her hands clasped over her knee, bouncing with what seemed like contained energy. Who knew that beneath that floral dress and the wrinkles was a woman with the heart of a Wall Street hustler? "So, you're telling me all the dough I sent you for your meds and stuff, you've been playing the market with it?" I stared at her in disbelief. Granny B chuckled and winked. "Honey, you think I'd let your hard-earned cash rot under a mattress? No way. I've been growing it bit by bit." It felt unreal. I crunched the divorce papers in my hand, knowing that what Granny B had just told me was going to flip the script in a major way. James and Margaret, the perfect couple from next door, agreed to meet us one last time, probably thinking they could offer me some friendly advice on starting over. Margaret opened the door with all fake smiles. "Well, if it isn't the soon-to-be single lady, come in. We were just talking about you." James sat at the dining table, smirking without a care in the world. "Good of you to come by. We need to talk about the neighborhood now that you'll probably be moving somewhere more, affordable." I clenched my jaw, but remembered Granny's news. "I needed this, actually, James. I won't be going anywhere," Granny B piped up. "She's got a juicy bit of news. Tell him, hun." I enjoyed the suspense, stretching their faces tight. Turns out, I got a little nest egg waiting for me. Granny's been smart with the money. James laughed harsh and loud. "What, did you win the lottery or something, Granny B?" Granny grinned, sharp as a tack. "Better." I turned her spare change into a cool 2 million. The smiles fell off James and Margaret's faces like overripe fruit. 2 million, Margaret's voice came out strangled. "Yep, and I don't plan to spend it on this neighborhood." My words felt heavy as I watched their painted-on warmth crumble. Granny slapped a hand on her thigh, triumphant. "Ain't that something? Just when you think life's kicked you, it decides to kiss you instead." James started babbling something about how half of this money belongs to him. I burst out laughing, reminding him of the prenuptial agreement I had signed. At this moment, his mother would probably like to go back 6 months to destroy this paper. James and Margaret sat in silence, looking at us with puppy dog eyes. I couldn't help but relish the irony. We didn't linger much longer. There was nothing left to say. As we walked out, Granny B draped an arm around my shoulders. So what's first on the millionaire to-do list? She asked, squeezing me tight. First, I'm getting an ice cream, a big one with all the fixings, I said, the future suddenly bright and wide open. Granny let out a hearty laugh, the sound mingling with the promise of an unseen fortune, now seen and closer than ever. The phone rang again. I was pretty sure it was James trying his luck once more, but this time it went straight to voicemail. I had stuff to sort out and no desire to entertain that mess. I heaved a sigh, looking around my cramped apartment cluttered with memories, too many of them pinned to James, and a shadow that loomed like a bad smell. Grandma, with her sharp eyes and a non-nonsense attitude, was right as rain. Why do you even keep that thing on? Grandma gestured at the phone with a scoff, busy shuffling through a pile of real estate listings. I shrugged and tossed the phone on the couch. Guess I'm too soft, squishy as an overripe tomato, she snorted. We need to get moving. I don't want James or his mama knocking on our door trying to weasel back into our lives when we've barely shucked him off. I know, Grams. Thanks. I flashed her a grateful look. So, where to? She slapped a listing onto the kitchen table. It was circled and bold. Here, 2 bedrooms, cleaner air, away from unwanted pests. I skimmed the details. Looks decent, Grams. Any pizza joints nearby. The next day dawned fresh. We were off, the apartment ad in hand, and a skipping grandma step. The listing agent met us at the property, all smiles and slicked back hair reeking of too much aftershave. Welcome, ladies, he extended his hand right at Grandma. She eyed it like it was a dead fish, but shook it all the same. Cut to the chase, hot shot. We're not here for pleasantries. I bit back a laugh as the agent's smile twitched. Of course, of course. He quickly unlocked the door. This way, please. The place was a gem compared to where we were. Good light, clean floors, and the air didn't hold any of James's cologne. Grandma handled it like she was born in a market stall. The price dropped, terms changed. By the time we walked out, the agent looked 2 inches shorter. The move went smooth. Neighbors were quick to say hi, a couple of them inviting us over for beers and a barbecue. They asked about my story, but I kept it simple. I was done letting my past hitch a ride. The new place shaped up nice. I continued to work as a nurse, and Grandma found her corner for knitting and gossiping with Mrs. Ham from next door, who had more sass packed in her tiny frame than anyone I'd ever met. One evening, I grabbed a pizza from the new joint, of course, and headed home. As I flipped open the box, the steam carried that cheesy aroma up, and I couldn't help but smile. So we settled in, me and Grandma, our little team. The taste of fresh starts and thick crust pizza in the air, laughter from the neighbor's yard spilling in through our open window, and a sense of peace finally making itself at home. James and his empty promises faded into the background noise, just like the buzz of the city we'd left behind. I was looking forward, and the view was pretty damn good.
My name is Sarah, and I'm married to Tom. We've been married for 2 years now. I really wanted to have kids by now, but it hasn't happened yet. I like my job, it makes me feel important, so I'm not in a rush to have kids. But Tom feels differently. He recently told me he's upset that we haven't had kids yet. How long until we have a baby? Please, hurry up, my mom can't wait, he said. I went to the hospital, but the doctors said nothing was wrong with me. If you want, we can get you checked up too, I suggested to Tom. You're saying it's my fault we can't have kids. It can't be me, Tom argued. How can you be so sure? Sometimes it's the men who have issues, I replied. I can't be the problem. Stop saying that, Tom insisted. Well, if neither of us has fertility problems, let's see it as a good thing and wait a bit longer, I suggested. Why are you going easy on yourself? My mom really wants to meet her grandkids soon, Tom kept insisting. Every time Tom sees his mom, she asks, "Is the baby here yet?" He's still refusing to get checked at the hospital, even though it's causing issues. He's sure he's not the reason we can't have kids. I got another checkup because I was worried, but everything seemed fine. Tham doesn't get that we only have one chance each month to have a baby. He keeps asking, "Are you ready for a baby yet?" I'm tired of him and Mom asking, "Are you ready for a baby yet?" Mom said the same thing today. She wants to see her grandchild's face soon, I complained. Again, "Please let's hurry up." Mom really wants it, Tham urged. "We can't rush this," I explained. Every time we talk, it feels like we end up in the same argument. We've been having fewer and fewer conversations lately. Maybe it's because we don't talk much, but it's causing a lot of problems like this, I reflected. "Mom's on her way," Tham suddenly announced. "Right now," I exclaimed. "Why does it matter? If she's coming, let me know so I can prepare." "You're talking too much," Tham snapped back. "She has a message for you," he added. "Is it about kids again?" I sighed. "I've had enough. I don't care anymore," Tham muttered. "That's what I hear every time I see her. It's your fault we can't have kids, so you need to explain it to her," I said, feeling frustrated. Just then, my mother-in-law walked in as we were talking. "I'm sorry to interrupt. Here, I brought this for you," she said, handing me something. "What is it?" I asked. "You can check them out yourself. They're a belly band and a lucky charm," she explained. "What's the belly band for?" I asked. "It's important to keep your stomach cool when trying to have a baby, so you should use it," she advised. "But it's too hot to wear a fuzzy belly band in the summer," I objected. "You're looking at it the wrong way. This room is too cold because of the air conditioning. It chills your stomach," she argued. "And how does this amulet work?" I asked. "It's a lucky charm from a famous temple for kids. After praying there, I heard that a celebrity had a baby. It seemed to bring good luck. So I went there yesterday despite the distance," she explained. "You didn't need to go that far," I said. "Don't worry just because you're more relaxed about this. As I've said before, I really want to see my grandkids. I went to the hospital, and it's not me," I repeated. Tham was sitting away from us, acting like he wasn't involved. "Why haven't you gotten pregnant yet?" my mother-in-law suddenly asked me. "I'm not sure why you're asking," I replied. "Why don't you try another hospital for a second opinion? Maybe a specialized hospital? I'll help you find one," she suggested. "You don't have to do that. I'm sure it's not Tham, so I can only think it's because of you," I responded. "Tham hasn't been checked yet." "How can you be so sure he's not infertile?" my mother-in-law asked. "Because Tham, who seemed like he wasn't paying attention, interrupted the conversation. "Mom, don't say things that aren't necessary," he advised. "Sorry," my mother-in-law stopped talking suddenly. "I think a package will be delivered by courier tomorrow, so please accept it," she said. "I just wanted to give you this today, so I'll leave now," my mother-in-law announced before leaving me with only a belly band and a lucky charm for the baby. The next day, when the package arrived, I couldn't help but laugh. Inside were all sorts of good luck charms for having a baby. "Your mom sent me a package. What was in it?" I asked Tham. "Pomegranates, herring roe, and peaches," he replied. "Why did she send those?" I wondered. "All three are seen as lucky foods that are supposed to bring good fortune for having kids," he explained. "I get it. Mom really wants to see her grandkids," I thought out loud. "I understand she's excited, but it feels a bit overwhelming," Tham remarked. "Why are you talking about Mom like that? She's genuinely thrilled about having a grandchild," Tham defended. "Don't you feel pressured too?" I asked. "Yeah, but I'm not worried. It's not my problem. It doesn't concern me," he replied. "What do you mean it doesn't concern you?" "It's our issue because we're together," I argued. "It's your problem that we can't have kids, so no, it's not my concern," he retorted. "It feels like it's my fault that we can't conceive, even though the hospital says there's nothing wrong with me. So why don't you go to another hospital for a thorough checkup like my mom suggested?" I proposed. "Why don't you ask her to help find a good hospital?" he suggested. "The hospital I went to is well known for fertility treatments. But maybe it's just famous, not actually good," I speculated. "If you're suggesting that, why not ask your mom to find one?" he suggested. "Are you finally willing to do it?" I asked. "Yes, if you also get checked out," he agreed. "Why should I go to the hospital?" I questioned. I couldn't understand why Tham was so confident. Then he dropped a bombshell on me. "I've never mentioned it before, but you've been suspicious for a while, and I'm tired of hiding it. So I'll tell you," Tham confessed. "What is it?" I asked, confused. I've actually been married before, Tham revealed. What? What do you mean? I exclaimed, shocked. I got divorced 2 years before marrying you, he admitted. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded. Well, I got divorced because my ex cheated on me. She didn't ask for child support or anything, so I didn't think it was important to mention, he explained. Are you saying you have children? I asked, bewildered. A son, yes. I haven't seen him since he was born after the divorce, he confessed. I'm lost. I don't understand what you're saying, I admitted. That proves I'm not incapable of having kids. That's why you were so sure it wasn't me, he pointed out. I'm hurt that you think it's me, but it's possible you became infertile in the 2 years after your divorce, I argued. You're still blaming others. You're the issue, so own up to it and do something about it, he accused. I'm not talking about admitting or not admitting. You're starting to annoy me, I shot back. In my 2nd year of marriage, I learned for the first time that Tham had been divorced and had a child. Even after hearing his story, I still wasn't completely convinced that I was to blame for our inability to have kids. I decided to dig deeper into Tham's past. I planned to ask for a divorce once I finished my research. I couldn't bear to stay with Tham any longer. I tried my best to avoid talking to him because he always said hurtful things to me. And of course, we never had intimate relations under such strange circumstances, so pregnancy was out of the question. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, unaware of our situation, continued to pressure me about having children. Then, one day, Tham approached me looking irritated. By now, I was accustomed to being treated with disdain. He spoke up. I've been thinking about getting a divorce. We don't talk anymore. All we do is fight, and we haven't been able to have kids no matter how long I wait, he declared. I was surprised by his sudden announcement, but I responded calmly. Okay, that's fine. What? Tham was puzzled by my response. He must have expected me to object. Here are the divorce papers. I've filled out all the necessary information already, he stated. What? Why are they already filled out? I asked, shocked. I filled them out so I could end things whenever I wanted. Do you want a divorce? He asked. Yes, I replied, only partly joking. I'm not joking. Do you really want this? He pressed. You said it yourself, I reminded him. I didn't think it would come to this. Did you expect me to beg you not to go through with it? He questioned. Well, we hardly talk anymore, so I thought maybe this was a chance for us to talk and fix things, I explained. Then why didn't you say that from the start? He asked. I wanted things to go back to how they were. But that's not possible, I replied. I'll divorce you right now if that's what you want, he offered. That's not what I want, I admitted. Despite Tham's offer for a divorce, he continued to complain. Our conversations went on, even though it seemed pointless. Then my mother-in-law arrived, right on time. What's going on? She asked. I went out with some friends and got you some gifts, she said, handing me another charm. I visited a different shrine known for childbirth, so I got you this. I've been praying there, and I'm sure it'll bring you good luck this time. We don't need this anymore, I declared. My mother-in-law's face lit up at my words, but I could tell she had misunderstood something. I had a feeling things were about to get complicated again. Well, does this mean you no longer need it? She asked eagerly. Finally, I guess it's because of all my efforts. I'm so relieved, she exclaimed. That's partly right. We need to go back to show our gratitude, she suggested. We? I asked. My mother-in-law stood before me, looking happy. Tham stood beside me, silent, avoiding eye contact. I knew my next words would disappoint my mother-in-law. What is it exactly? Please don't tell me you're about to say what I think you're going to say, she urged. We've decided to get a divorce, I announced. What? Divorce? I thought you were expecting a baby, she replied, shocked. We were just talking about it. Is this a sudden decision? She pressed. Not really. I've been thinking about it for a while, I explained. Are you leaving because you can't have kids? She speculated. No, that's not why I'm divorcing him, I clarified. Well, if you can't get pregnant, maybe it's better for him to divorce you and marry someone else, she suggested. It would be his third marriage, not second. You know that? I reminded her. I found out recently. His ex-wife got pregnant soon after they divorced, she revealed. Okay, I responded, feeling a mix of emotions. So I can only assume you're to blame. If you leave, I'll feel relieved, Tham's mother asserted. I understand. Tham has always been popular with women. He'll find someone soon. Hopefully, our next meeting will bring better news, I replied. Well, if you've made up your mind, get divorced soon. I'm leaving, you two sort out the rest, my mother-in-law declared before leaving, unaware of the whole truth. Once she left, Tham and I continued our conversation. Let's file for divorce right away. I want to start a family soon, and I realize I don't enjoy spending time with you anymore. Let's just get it over with, Tham suggested. Then do it quickly, I replied, handing him the papers to fill out. All I have to do is submit them. By the way, you'll have to leave the house when we divorce, I informed him. What? Why? Tham questioned. I've been making mortgage payments, have you forgotten? My parents paid off the loan and bought this house outright. You were just repaying my parents' loan, I clarified. Oh, so you're leaving because of this? Tham realized. We did have quite a bit of money saved up, he continued. I don't have any money saved, but didn't you say you had around 10 million? I reminded him. That's the money I saved before we got married, so it's not included in the property division, he explained. Right, I confirmed. Well, it doesn't matter. You're starting a new chapter, he remarked. Yes, and I'm also going to sue you and your mother for emotional distress, I declared. What? Why? Tham asked, surprised. For all the hurtful things you've said to me, treating me like I'm defective, I explained. But it's true, Tham argued. Do you really think I'm the reason we couldn't conceive? I challenged. It's obvious. I have a biological child, Tham insisted. That's when I revealed everything to Tham, shocking him. It turns out your child from your ex-wife might not be yours, I revealed. What are you talking about? Tham asked, bewildered. I got curious about Tham's past after learning about his previous marriage, so I decided to look for clues in his house. Eventually, I found a picture, I explained. Tham tends to hold onto old memories, and I found a few tucked away in a drawer in his work desk, I continued. I looked up his ex-wife's name on social media and found her profile right away. From there, I learned more about who she was, I revealed. Isn't this your ex-wife? I showed him a screen from social media. Tham looked surprised, but I wasn't shocked. Is the child in this picture really yours? I asked him. Tham seemed puzzled. I continued with my story. This child clearly looks foreign. I was looking at your ex-wife's social media, and her husband is from another country. I'm not familiar with him. It seems they're living abroad, I explained. I divorced my ex-wife quickly because she cheated on me, but before the divorce, she got pregnant and claimed it was our child. I'm pretty sure it was his child, Tham admitted. Really? I asked. In any case, you don't have any biological children, I pointed out. Could I be the reason you can't conceive? Tham wondered. That's likely. I went to another hospital, and my body was fine. I'm going to get checked out too, I replied. Will you drop the divorce and go through treatment with me if I'm the reason you haven't been able to conceive? Tham asked. Why would I do that? I've already filled out the divorce papers. I'll file them tomorrow, I replied. Don't say that. I still care about you, Tham confessed. You don't enjoy being around me, do you? You'll find someone new soon, just as your mother predicted, I remarked. Let's discuss it again, Tham suggested. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, and I want you to pack your things and leave this week, I insisted. Oh no, Tham muttered. You wanted a divorce, didn't you? I reminded him. I'll talk to my lawyer about alimony. He'll hear from us. The next day, I filed for divorce. Tham moved out reluctantly back to his parents' place. It seems Tham hasn't told his mother that he might be the reason for our infertility. She's been pushing him to remarry quickly after the divorce, hoping for grandchildren. If he does remarry, I feel sorry for his next wife. His mother will probably pressure her too for not having children. Since the divorce, I've thrown myself into my work. I sold the house Tham, and I shared for a good price and repaid my parents the money they lent me, as well as the alimony I received from Tham and his mother. Now I'm living in an apartment. I've started dating a coworker who was supportive during my divorce. We were friends before, and now we're living together. If I marry this man, I hope we'll be blessed with children and that I'll find happiness again.
My name is Emily, and I'm 35 years old. For the past 10 years, I've been taking care of our home. My husband, Michael, is a doctor. We don't have any children, but we've been pretty happy. Then one day, everything changed. Michael came home late as usual and told me something shocking. I want a divorce. I'm marrying someone else, he said. I was stunned. What do you mean? I asked. We didn't marry for love, he added, and he was right. Our marriage was more of an arrangement. His parents wanted him to marry, and I seemed like a good match. We barely knew each other before we got married. The only thing we really had in common was our last name. Looking back, maybe I liked the idea of sharing the same last name, so we rushed into marriage. And for a while, things were okay. I never thought we'd end up divorcing after 10 years. Even though our marriage wasn't based on love, we'd been together for so long. But now, out of the blue, you want to marry someone else. When did you start betraying me? I asked, but Michael denied it. He said he met this nurse at the hospital about a year ago and was attracted to her charm. He said he was tired of living with someone as boring as me. I was shocked and hurt. How can you say that after all these years? I asked, but Michael was cold. He said living with me had been like hell, and he was done. I agreed to the divorce, even though it broke my heart. Then Michael revealed something else. We don't even need to go through the legal process because I never officially registered our marriage. We were just living together, not legally married. I felt betrayed and angry. Michael had kept this secret from me all these years, and now he was using it to avoid giving me anything in the divorce. The day we thought our marriage would be registered was actually the day it officially ended. I couldn't go because of an urgent matter, he said, but it turns out I never submitted it. Not submitted? Are you joking? We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. It's impossible that you didn't submit it, I exclaimed. Normally, yes. But I made that rule at the beginning. If you went to the office, everything would be ruined. When we got married, we made some rules. I, as a homemaker, would handle all the household chores. I was on an allowance and part-time work was prohibited. And Michael would handle all governmental and official matters. Why would you do such a thing? I asked. Because I was about to be forced into a marriage with someone I didn't love. I wasn't going to submit it easily. I was saving marriage for someone I truly wanted to be with. Then you should have refused the marriage proposal in the first place. I couldn't refuse. My parents are stubborn and wouldn't listen. What would have happened if I said I didn't want to marry? Plus, I wanted a housekeeper. I'm a busy doctor and can't often tend to household chores, so I decided to marry you as a housekeeper. It was a good deal for you too, right? You could eat well and have a roof over your head without working. You seemed desperate to get married too. Maybe you felt pressured because your friends were getting married. Even though we weren't actually married, you were seen as the woman who married a doctor. This 10-year relationship was a win-win for both of us. That's all it was, and it ends today. You should be grateful for the good times you had. Now you have to live on your own without relying on others. I can't believe this. Oh, and one more thing. Don't tell my parents about this. If you do something unnecessary, you know what will happen to your father, right? My father runs a medical equipment sales company and has a contract with the hospital where Michael works. Our marriage was how this connection was made. Michael was threatening me, implying that if I told his parents, he would sever the contract with my father's company. It's your fault for being deceived. How pitiful to be thrown out with nothing, he said, laughing. But the one who would be thrown out without knowing anything was actually him. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. What's so funny all of a sudden? He asked. I can't believe you became a doctor with that kind of knowledge, I said. What do you mean? He asked. I knew all along about your mistress and that you didn't submit our marriage registration. That's impossible. That's why I've been preparing, waiting for the day you'd bring it up yourself. I continued, I had a gut feeling about your infidelity for the past 6 months, but I lacked solid evidence to confront you. So I decided to hire a private investigator to look into your affair. The investigator told me, ma'am, there are 2 things I need to tell you. The first is that your husband is indeed having an affair. We got evidence of him entering a hotel with a nurse from his workplace. And the second is from their conversations. There's a possibility that you two are not legally married. Not legally married? What does that mean? I asked. I'd overheard your husband and his mistress at a cafe, the investigator continued. He said they didn't need to worry about alimony or property division since they never submitted a marriage registration. What? I can't believe it. We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. I don't know why he didn't submit the marriage registration. That's why he never let me handle any official procedures. Yeah, that seems to be the case. I can't believe this. How could this happen? It's unusual to hear about not submitting a marriage registration for 10 years, but it's not unheard of. This is too much. Am I just supposed to accept this? If we were never married from the start, there's nothing I can do. Not necessarily. What do you mean? Let's make him pay for deceiving you for 10 years. First, we need to prepare without him noticing, the investigator suggested. So I started preparing with the investigator to take action against my husband. So what if you knew we were never legally married from the start? Does that justify your actions with other women? Do you think you can avoid taking any responsibility? He said, trying to dismiss his actions. You called me pitiful for not knowing the truth, but it turns out you were the one who was pitiful. What do you mean? We're considered to be in a common law relationship on paper. So what? You might not know, but you can actually claim alimony and divide property in a common law relationship. What? He didn't know that not registering our marriage would come back to bite him. In a common law relationship, you can make claims. It's not widely known, but it's possible. Of course, there are conditions. From what I see in your case, it seems you meet those conditions. What are these conditions? The common law relationship is established based on two main criteria. First, both parties must have intended to marry. It's not just about living together, there must be a mutual intention to marry. This can be shown through things like having a wedding ceremony or being recognized as a couple by others. We did have a wedding ceremony, and our families and friends recognize us as a couple. So we meet the first criterion. The second criterion is living as if married. This includes sharing a household for more than 3 years. You've been living together as a couple for over 10 years. As a homemaker, you've obviously shared the household finances. This is recognized as a marital relationship. So that means if you can provide proof of what we discussed, you can claim alimony and divide property. I'm not an expert in this area, so I'll introduce you to a lawyer. You can work with them to bring him down. After consulting the lawyer I was referred to, I learned that I could indeed claim alimony and property division from my husband. I'm going to demand alimony and property division from you, I informed my husband, who turned pale. His confidence, which had been evident just a moment ago, was gone. But even if you can claim alimony and property division, you're just an unemployed woman. Do you plan to rely on your parents after being kicked out? He asked. Didn't I say I was preparing? I've already found a job starting next month. I've also found a new place to live. Don't worry about me. You thought I, a clueless homemaker, would be helpless, but the tables have turned. I'll make sure to discuss this with your parents, just so you know. Do you not care what happens to your father? If they want to break the contract, let them. Sure, you were the link to the hospital, but the contract continued because of my father and his company's efforts. Whether or not they keep the contract is up to them. Let's see if they'll break a contract just because the doctor's wife of 10 years was a lie. Try saying that. My father and I won't be affected if the contract is broken over this. It only shows the depth of their trust. We'll just find another hospital to partner with, I said firmly, taking out my phone. You're not calling your parents, are you? He asked nervously. That's exactly what I'm doing. Our parents think we're still married. It's only natural to inform them if this relationship is ending. To my surprise, my husband began to apologize. Please let me talk to them. Don't call. Why? You know how strict my parents are. If they find out about this, it's over. What does that have to do with me? Huh? You're asking me not to tell the truth because your parents are strict? Are you kidding? You could have refused to marry me from the start if you didn't intend to. After 10 years of a marriage based on lies, you're afraid of your parents finding out. I can't accept such a convenient story, but I can accept telling them the truth. I'll make sure both your parents and mine know everything. And so I called both sets of parents. All four were shocked upon hearing my story, and a meeting was promptly arranged at our house. I've heard everything over the phone. Is it true that you pretended to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration? Speak up, you foolish son, my father-in-law demanded. It's true. I didn't submit it. Why did you do that? Didn't you think about how Emily would feel? I didn't have a choice. No choice? How can you say that? It's your fault, Mom and Dad. I didn't want to get married, but you started looking for a bride for me anyway, saying it was time. You arranged meetings and pressured me into marriage. But you agreed to it, didn't you? I had to agree. If I had refused, you would have caused a scene, so I decided to go through with it. If you were willing to marry, why didn't you register the marriage? I read about a man online who was in the same situation. He didn't want to marry but had to because of his parents. He lived as if married without registering, then revealed the truth when he found someone he truly loved. That's shocking. What happened to him in the end? Now he's married to the person he loves and has a real marriage, so I plan to marry my girlfriend too and have a real marriage. After hearing his explanation, my parents, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke up. A real marriage, huh? Maybe you didn't marry for love, but remember what you promised at the wedding? We will always care for each other and create a happy home. What did those words mean to you? What did you show us back then? We trusted you with our daughter's happiness, but for 10 years you deceived her by not registering the marriage. Did you create a happy home? and now you're leaving her for another woman. Can someone who acts without care, even if they change partners, truly have a real marriage? Well, we were glad you married our daughter, not just because you're a doctor. We thought she could build a happy life with someone as sincere as you. But it seems we were wrong and misled. And you threatened our daughter that if she told us, you'd end your business contract with us. Really? If you're going to threaten our daughter, we'll end the contract ourselves. Be warned, we will speak the truth when asked. If you do that, there will be gossip at the hospital. Gossip? Yes, maybe, but that's because of what you did. You were the one who threatened us with ending the contract. My husband panicked at this unexpected turn. Please, let's talk about this calmly. Don't play games with us. My father-in-law grabbed my husband's collar, furious. We didn't raise you to be a scoundrel. What were you thinking? Dad, please stop. By not registering the marriage, you may have thought you were protecting yourself, but because of your selfish actions, Emily was misled for 10 years. What were you thinking, causing so much trouble to others? The room fell silent. Faced with my father-in-law's words, my husband had nothing more to say. Emily and her parents, I'm really sorry for the trouble caused by this idiot. No, your parents shouldn't apologize. It's not their fault. But as parents, we partly bear responsibility for letting him behave this way. We'll take him home now and ensure he stops his reckless actions. We'll handle the aftermath properly. We're deeply sorry for all of this. With that, my husband was taken away by his parents to their home. You've been through so much. You should come back home for now and rest. We'll figure out the next steps later. Don't worry about anything right now, my parents said kindly. Thank you, but I'm not going back home just yet. There are things I need to take care of. I declined and chose to stay in my own home. What I needed to do was prepare for the final settlement with my now ex-husband, gathering evidence for our common law relationship. I was preparing to claim alimony and divide our assets. A few weeks later, I arranged a meeting with a lawyer. Even if I agree to alimony, why should I divide my property? She's been a homemaker for 10 years, never worked a day. I paid for everything: furniture, clothes, food. Now you're saying I have to give away the money I worked hard for. He protested, unwilling to accept sharing his earnings with me. Yes, that's correct. Your earnings and the belongings acquired during our relationship are subject to division. Why does it have to be like this? Who took care of the house and cooked meals while you were at work? Who managed everything at home? That doesn't matter now. No, it does matter. A homemaker deserves a share of the assets because running a household and raising children have real economic value. Speaking not just as a lawyer but as a person, do you think housework is something anyone can do, something that's just expected of a homemaker? The reason you could focus on your career was because of her support. Don't overlook that. What? This situation is a consequence of your actions, yet you're upset about fairness. What did you say? Never mind. Anyway, she's entitled to half of our assets through property division. That's how it works. Damn. As for alimony, we're seeking $100,000 from you. $100,000? Why so much for a relationship that wasn't even legally married? It's precisely because it wasn't a legal marriage. Typically, alimony in common law relationships ranges from $10,000 to $40,000. However, in your case, you pretended to be married for 10 years and then tried to discard her when you found someone else. The amount is based on the seriousness and duration of your actions. But still, you might think 10 years is short, but it's longer than you realize. During that time, she committed herself to you, believing you were married. You have no right to complain after betraying her. It was a powerful response. He had no rebuttal and reluctantly agreed to my terms. Later, I also sent a notice of claim for alimony to his mistress. With the help of an investigator, I knew who she was and where she worked, a nurse at the same hospital where he did. Wait, this isn't what you told me. What's going on? I told you not to approach me at work. I received this from your wife. You said there wouldn't be any alimony because we weren't legally married. What's going on? Later, I found out that in a panic after receiving the alimony claim from me, she confronted him at the hospital with the notice. All right, let's talk about this later, not here. There are too many people around. We'll both be in trouble if this gets out. I don't care about that. I can't afford this kind of alimony. You said it would be fine, so you should pay it. What? I'm not paying anything. You wanted this relationship. You said I was the one for you, that you wanted to marry me. Hey, keep it down. Everyone can hear us. Just so you know, I'm not the one at fault here. If you want to settle things with your wife, handle it yourself. Tell her I don't owe her anything, and that you'll sort everything out. Wait. This conversation ended up exposing their affair to the entire hospital, quickly becoming the talk of the place. Then came the final blow when my father requested to terminate our contract with the hospital. I apologize, but we'd like to end our contract by the end of next month. Aware of the rumors, the hospital inquired, "Forgive me for asking, but is the reason for canceling related to Dr. Michael's affair? It's become quite a topic here. Yes, a nurse believed to be involved caused quite a scene. I never imagined he had pretended to be married for 10 years without actually registering. You mean he never filed the marriage registration? Did you know he hadn't done that? All I knew was that he was married and had an affair. What do you mean he didn't file the marriage registration? After my father's request, it came to light that he had deceived me for 10 years by not filing the marriage registration. This news spread among the other nurses. Dr. Michael deceived his wife for 10 years by not filing the marriage registration and had an affair with a nurse. How awful! How could he do that? Could someone really go unnoticed for 10 years? It seems Emily's maiden name was the same, and he handled all the official paperwork. That's concerning. The rumors spread not only among hospital staff but also reached patients, leading both Michael and his mistress to face cold stares. Unable to bear it, they both resigned from the hospital soon after. As my father asked me, "Did you manage to get the alimony?" Yes, I received payments from both him and his mistress. She resisted paying until the end, claiming she was also deceived, but the lawyer explained her argument wouldn't hold, and she reluctantly agreed to pay. That's good. What about you, Dad? Did the contract end up getting canceled? No, that's not happening anymore. He resigned, and because our company is trusted, the hospital asked us to keep the contract. We couldn't cancel it after they asked like that. That's a relief. Afterwards, I started a new life in a new place and found happiness. About a year and a half later, my ex-husband reached out to me. Is it true you got remarried? I had married a man I met through work, and somehow he had found out. I wonder whose number this is. You went through the trouble of changing your number just to contact me. Just answer my question. Yes, I got married. You betrayed me. Betrayal? We were never legally married, so I didn't think it would matter to you, right? That's beside the point. Exactly, things are different now. We're completely separated, so my marriage has nothing to do with you. Is that why you contacted me? After I said this, he seemed speechless for a moment, then he scoffed. Of course you're still unmarried, probably because you haven't bothered to file any paperwork. That's just like you. But he was mistaken. Actually, my husband isn't like you at all. He knows everything about your situation, so to ease any concerns I had, we went together to handle the paperwork. Unfortunately for you, things didn't turn out as you assumed. I can understand why you might wish for my unhappiness, given your own misery, but I'm sorry to disappoint you. We're happily married. I told him this and hung up the phone. I don't know what kind of life he leads now, but unless he changes his selfish ways, he's unlikely to find happiness.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Chen. Growing up, my parents instilled in me the belief that true wealth comes from humility and smart work. While other kids dreamed of being doctors or lawyers, I was captivated by the stock market. By 12, I was devouring investment books and obsessively tracking market trends, much to my parents' bewilderment. "Sweetie, maybe you should spend more time with your friends," my mom would suggest, eyeing me over stacks of financial reports. "This is fun for me, Mom," I'd reply without looking up. "Did you know Warren Buffett bought his first stock at 11? She'd chuckle, shaking her head. "Just promise me you won't forget to live while you're planning your empire." That promise grew harder to keep as my hobby turned into a passion and eventually expertise. By 16, I was managing a modest portfolio with my savings and allowance. Winning a full scholarship to study finance at Harvard felt like destiny. At Harvard, I met Michael. He was studying business administration, charming, ambitious, and aiming to climb the corporate ladder. We met during finals week, both reaching for the same economics textbook. "Ladies first," he said with a warm smile. I laughed. "Thanks, I'm Jennifer." "Michael, maybe we could study together." What began as a shared study session blossomed into daily coffee dates, then a relationship. Unlike others I'd met, Michael admired my ambition. "You're going to dominate the business world," he'd say, watching me dissect market trends. "Any company would be lucky to have you." What he didn't know was that I wasn't planning to work for anyone else. My scholarship covered everything, so I funneled my earnings into investments. By graduation, my portfolio had grown exponentially. But I kept it quiet. I wanted success on my terms, not as the girl with the trust fund. Michael landed a prestigious job at Sterling Industries, a major tech firm in Boston, while I chose to work independently. When I declined several high-profile offers, Michael was skeptical. "Are you sure?" he asked. "These are dream opportunities." "I have my own plans," I replied with a smile. "Trust me." A year later, we got married in a modest ceremony. Michael's mother, Patricia, was less than thrilled with my career choice. "Investment consulting," she'd sneer. "Is that even a real job?" I smiled, recalling my parents' advice about staying humble. By then, my portfolio was worth over $50 million, strategically diversified and quietly making me one of Sterling's largest individual shareholders. Though no one, not even Michael, knew. Michael thrived at Sterling, rising through the ranks to work under James Wilson, the arrogant VP of operations. Wilson was infamous for his outdated views, especially about women. "The problem with modern marriages," he'd say at company events, "is women forgetting their place." Michael would laugh awkwardly, avoiding confrontation. It irritated me, but I let it slide until the annual executive party. Sterling was unveiling restructuring plans, and as a key shareholder, I had a vested interest in attending. "Are you sure you want to come?" Michael asked. "These events can be dull for non-employees." "I think it's time I took a closer look at your work," I replied, carefully applying my makeup. I chose a classic black dress, pearl earrings, and my grandmother's vintage watch, a talisman in every major decision I'd made. The hotel ballroom buzzed with chatter as we arrived. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and the scent of champagne lingered in the air. Michael led me to James Wilson, who was holding court near the bar. "Jennifer." "Michael," James called, raising his glass. We were just discussing Sterling's exciting new direction. "Cutting R&D for short-term profits?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Doesn't innovation drive sustainable growth?" James's smile faltered. "Ah, the little wife has opinions on business, does she?" Laughter rippled through the group. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "She likes to read the financial news," he said quickly. "Honey, maybe we should grab some drinks." But James wasn't done. "Sterling's biggest problem," he announced loudly, "is too many voices from people who don't understand real business, like housewives who think reading the Wall Street Journal makes them experts." The crowd chuckled, but I noticed the CEO, Thomas Richards, watching with interest. My husband, once so proud of my intelligence, stared at his shoes. Before I could speak, a familiar voice interrupted. "Actually, James, you might want to rethink that." Sarah Martinez, my private banker and confidant, stepped forward, her smile sharp. "Should I explain, Jennifer, or would you like to?" James's smug expression faltered. "What's going on here?" I straightened, feeling my grandmother's watch against my wrist. The time had come. "Since you're so concerned about shareholder value, James," I said, my voice calm, "perhaps we should discuss the report I'm presenting at Monday's board meeting. The one outlining why your restructuring plan will fail." James turned crimson. "Board meeting? What are you talking about?" CEO Richards stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Jennifer Chen, JC Holdings." I knew the name sounded familiar. I smiled. Surprise. Strategic anonymity can be a powerful tool. "What's going on?" Michael whispered, his face pale and voice trembling. Sarah stepped forward, her tone cutting through the silence. "Your wife," she announced to the room, "owns 51% of Sterling Industries shares. And no, she doesn't spend her days shopping." The silence hung for a moment before chaos erupted. James Wilson's face turned a vivid red, cycling through shades I didn't know were possible. Michael looked as though he might faint. "This is absurd," James sputtered. "There must be some mistake." Sarah, ever composed, tapped on her tablet. "I can show you the documentation if you'd like. I have all the records right here." CEO Richards stepped forward, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That won't be necessary, Sarah. I've suspected as much for some time. The board has been impressed with Mrs. Chen's insights and recommendations for years." James turned to him, stunned. "You knew?" "Of course," Richards replied smoothly. "Why do you think your restructuring plan hasn't been approved?" Mrs. Chen raised significant objections. Michael finally found his voice, though it wavered. "Jennifer." "How? When?" I met his wide-eyed gaze. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," I suggested, glancing at the growing crowd of onlookers. "My office is just upstairs," Richards offered. shall we?" The elevator ride was oppressively silent. Michael alternated between glancing at me and staring at the floor, while James seethed. Sarah, steady as ever, stood by my side, a quiet but unwavering presence. Richard's office was expansive, with panoramic views of the Boston skyline. As we took our seats, James immediately claimed the chair nearest Richard's desk, as if proximity could restore his authority. "Well," Richards began, leaning back in his chair, "this has been an eventful evening." "Eventful?" James exploded. "This is outrageous. She can't possibly." "She can and does," Sarah interrupted, laying documents on the desk. "Jennifer Chen, through carefully managed investment vehicles, controls 51% of Sterling Industries. She's been building her position over the past 5 years. Michael's expression morphed from confusion to hurt. 5 years? But we've been married for 3. I started investing in Sterling before we met. I explained evenly. The company had potential but needed modernization. I saw an opportunity. Modernization? James sneered. Yes, James, I replied calmly. Modernization. Like fostering innovation instead of getting R&D. Like respecting your employees instead of perpetuating a toxic workplace. Richards leaned forward. Mrs. Chen's recommendations have been instrumental in shaping our strategy. Her analysis has consistently outperformed expectations. Michael's voice was barely audible. Why didn't you tell me? I held his gaze. Would it have made a difference? Would you have defended me against James's comments if you'd known I was Sterling's majority shareholder? He flinched, the answer clear without being spoken. This is preposterous, James barked, rising from his chair. I've dedicated 15 years to Sterling. You can't just turn it into a toxic environment where innovation and talent are stifled. I interrupted. James, your restructuring plan would destroy this company. The board won't be supporting it, Richards cut in. In fact, we need to discuss your future with Sterling. My future? James looked stricken. Yes, I said, standing to meet his glare. Your leadership is outdated, your strategies are short-sighted, and your conduct unacceptable. Sterling deserves better. You can't fire me, James shouted. You're just a majority shareholder, Sarah interjected coolly. And yes, she can. Michael remained frozen, his expression unreadable. You told me you were consulting, he murmured. You said it was small scale. I never lied, I said softly. I just didn't tell you everything. Would you have respected my decisions if I had? James erupted again, pointing at Michael. She's tearing us apart. Women like her. That's enough, Richard snapped, his tone sharp. James, you'll receive the details of your separation package tomorrow. Please leave. James stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Sarah excused herself, leaving me alone with Michael and Richards. Mrs. Chen, Richards began, will you be taking a more active role in the company? Yes, I replied firmly, starting with a comprehensive review of our culture and leadership. Michael finally spoke, his voice cracking. And what about us? I turned to him, my voice steady. That depends. Are you ready to see me as an equal, or am I still just the little wife you asked to stay quiet at company events? I need time, he stammered, standing abruptly. This is all too much. He left, and I watched his retreating figure. Richards cleared his throat. Family and business rarely mix well. True, I said, exhaling deeply, but principles shouldn't be compromised. The days that followed were a whirlwind. James's firing made headlines, Sterling Industries, a shakeup at the top. The stock price dipped briefly before recovering as my vision for the company became public. Michael stayed with his parents, processing everything. His mother left a string of hostile voicemails, which I deleted without hesitation. My focus remained on transforming Sterling, revitalizing R&D, implementing work-life balance policies, and fostering innovation. A week later, Michael returned. He looked worn, his usual polish replaced by exhaustion. Can we talk? He asked hesitantly. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat, then immediately stood again, pacing nervously. I've been thinking about everything, he began. About us, about work. And? I prompted. I was wrong, he admitted, his voice low. I let James and others disrespect you. I should have stood up for you. I was so focused on my career that I forgot what really matters. I watched him for a moment before replying. Change doesn't come through words, Michael. It comes through actions. Are you ready to show me that you see me as your equal? He nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. Yes, I am. I waited silently, giving him space to continue. But you weren't completely honest either, Michael added after a moment. You kept such a huge part of your life hidden from me. How are we supposed to have a real marriage with secrets like that? You're right, I admitted, keeping my voice calm. I should have trusted you with the truth. But Michael, ask yourself, why didn't I feel I could? He sank into the chair, his hands running through his hair. Because I showed you I couldn't be trusted. Every time I laughed at James's jokes, every time I told you to stay quiet. I proved I cared more about office politics than supporting my wife. The next few weeks tested everything, my marriage, my resolve, and my ability to steer Sterling Industries through massive change. James Wilson hadn't gone quietly. He hired a lawyer and threatened to sue for wrongful termination, and his allies within the company whispered behind my back. She's tearing down our traditions, they muttered in the break room. This is what happens when you let emotions run a business, others sneered. But facts don't lie. Within a month, employee satisfaction soared by 40%, and R&D, finally free from James's stifling grip, filed 12 patent applications. The stock price climbed steadily, proving that my changes were more than just radical. They were necessary. At home, Michael hovered in a strange limbo, sleeping in the guest room and walking on eggshells around me. His mother, Patricia, however, had no such hesitation. She stormed into our house one afternoon, her designer heels clicking like gunfire. We need to talk, she announced, barely pausing before stepping into the living room. By all means, I said dryly, closing the door behind her. This power trip of yours has gone far enough, she declared, folding her arms. You've made your point. Now step back and let the men handle business. I raised an eyebrow. The men? You've humiliated Michael enough already, she snapped. His colleagues don't know how to treat him anymore. Do you have any idea what this is doing to his career? Humiliating? I repeated. Like being laughed at during business functions? Like being dismissed as just a housewife? That's different. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. That's just how business works. Men need to. Need to what, Patricia? Undermine women to prop up their egos? Pretend competence doesn't exist if it comes from the wrong gender. You tricked him, she burst out. My son married you thinking you were a normal wife, and no. Now what? Michael's voice cut through the tension, startling us both. Michael. Patricia turned to him, her expression softening with relief. Thank goodness you're here. We need to talk sense into her before she destroys everything. But Michael wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on me, filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks, understanding. Mom, he said evenly, you need to leave. What? But? Now, he said firmly. After she left, silence settled between us. Michael sank onto the couch, exhaustion etched into his face. I heard everything, he said quietly, and I finally realized I've been just like her, treating you like you needed to be managed, not supported. And I'm sorry. I sat down beside him, keeping a cautious distance. I didn't want to outshine you, Michael. I just wanted your respect as your wife, as a partner, as a person. You have it, he said softly. I know I don't deserve your trust right now, but I want to earn it. Not because of your money or your power, but because I love you. And I want to be the partner you deserve. My phone buzzed, breaking the moment. It was Sarah. Jennifer, she said when I answered, James has withdrawn his lawsuit. Word about Sterling's latest quarterly projections has spread, and they're impressive. Send me the details, I said with a smile. And Sarah, thank you for everything. When I hung up, Michael asked, good news. James is backing down. I confirmed. It seems success really is the best revenge. Michael nodded thoughtfully. What happens now? With Sterling and with us? Sterling will keep evolving, I replied. We're rolling out a new parental leave policy and launching a mentorship program for women in tech next month. And us? He asked, his voice hesitant. I took a deep breath. That depends. Are you ready for a marriage of equals? Really ready? I'd like to try, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Starting with moving out of the guest room, If you're okay with that. It's killing my back. I laughed, surprising myself. We'll need couples counseling. And you'll have to stand up to your mother. Done, he said, grinning. Though maybe we should have dinner with her next week. I'd love to see her face when you explain your women's leadership initiative. For the first time in weeks, I felt real hope for our future.